This conference will now be recorded.
Hey, it must be 10 o'clock, so we'll call the meeting to order. I have a motion here, moved by Brian, seconded by Jason to confirm the agenda. Any discussion on that? Seeing none. Anyone opposed? Okay, that is carried. If there's any declaration of pecuniary interest, you can declare now or at any time through the meeting. And of course, then we get to send Lindsay some paperwork. Okay, don't see anything there. 5.1 is to resolve into committee of the whole it's still 10 o'clock, so we're doing good. To allow for fuller discussion regarding Township of Southgate official plan review. And that's been moved by Barbara, seconded by Jim. Any discussion on that? Anyone opposed to that? Okay, that is carried. And now we need a mover and seconder for the committee to appoint a chair for this committee of the whole. I don't know, Brian, I don't know if I should recognize you because I know what you're going to probably say. Go ahead, Brian.
I'll nominate Mr. John Woodbury to be chair of this meeting.
Okay, and Michael?
And so move that motion.
Okay. Did you have any other names involved, Michael?
Yeah, I was going to nominate Brian Millen to chair the meeting, but since he already did it, I'll just withdraw from not putting it up. So I'll just second his.
Should have picked you first. Do we have a
Next
second?
time.
Yep, next time for sure. Do we have a seconder for Brian's motion?
I think Councillor Shearson said he would second it.
Oh, okay. Anyone opposed to that? Okay, that is carried. Thanks, you two. 5.3, and that's that we be it resolved that the committee of the whole received the official plan review presentation, and the committee of the whole recommend the council receive the official plan review presentation, and that'll be moved by Michael, seconded by Barbara. So I think we'll, since that's on the table, we'll start with the presentation. Ron, thank you for being here. And we really look forward to working with you. So I'll turn it over to you for the presentation of what we want to do here.
Super. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council and staff. Yeah, it is a pleasure to be working with you guys. I've stood before you several times as a consultant with representing different projects, and now it's time to work with you, which is good. I'm working with Clint. Clint and I have known each other for many years in a professional capacity, and to be quite honest and not be corny, but it's good to be working with Clint. He's going to be very helpful in getting this project approved. We've also, Clint and I have met, and we've also had a number of discussions. At the same time, Clint and I met with Scott Randy from the county last week or 2 weeks ago, being the senior planner and the planning director. Really important to have them on side. As council's well aware, when you adopt the official plan, you're not actually the approval authority. You're adopting it. You're giving it a blessing, and but ultimately it ends up at county council. So county planning department will end up getting their fingerprints all over the project as well. So, you know, there's a lot of merit in bringing them on board now and bouncing different ideas off them. But at the same time, they're a very valuable resource. Like Scott and Randy are just, as you guys are well aware, they're just an excellent resource there. So that's great. We got the county planning department also doing the maps for us, as you're well aware. Those would be the schedules. Right now, we have mapping, new hazard land mapping from the Saugeen Valley Conservation Authority. And the county has already begun working on updating the hazard land mapping for us. That'll be our basis, if you will. I spoke with Grand River Conservation Authority yesterday, and they're going to have mapping, their portion of the hazard land mapping back to us within 2 weeks. So that's really good news. So that's the mapping. So the counties, we're working with the county technician on that. Great to have them doing the work. With regard to the text, we've already begun working on that. Now, excuse me, on that note, council will be asked throughout the process, obviously, for their opinions on various matters, because this is your official plan. And today we're going to talk about a few of those matters, and hopefully council can provide us with some direction. Now, if council needs some more time to think about some of these issues and maybe circle back at a later time, that's fine. But it will be helpful to get some direction on these 5 or 6 or 7 matters that we're about to talk about right now. The one thing I'll say is, keeping in mind, and you've heard this probably on numerous occasions from Clint, your official plan can be more restrictive than the county official plan. It has to be consistent with the provincial policy statement, but you can be more restrictive, or at least in most instances, you can be. So if that's the approach council wants to take, that's completely fine, and that's why we're having this discussion. When the county approved their new official plan 2 years ago, it was a little bit more permissive then, or the previous version, than the township's official plan. And now the province has really opened up a few things, and we'll get into that in a few minutes. So that the new county official plan has become even more permissive when it comes to certain things, mostly out in the countryside, rural and agricultural designations. So really what we're going to talk about today is council's position on some of these matters and where you want to go. So let's start off with the mapping. There in the county official plan now, there's schedules A, B, and C, and then appendices A, B, C, D, and E. So we've got 8 maps, and it's either good or bad, but we're required to carry forward basically those same policies and that same level of detail, because all of that comes from the provincial government. For example, like we do have to have a land use schedule. That's the most important thing. But the county official plan also has mapping with regard to some natural heritage features, like significant wetlands, significant valley lands. They've mapped wildfire areas, wellhead protection areas, which we're going to certainly do, treaty and traditional territories. And then something that also is new is shale drift, which is something to do with, well, not something to do with bedrock, but has something to do with aggregate extraction. So the question is, with regard to the mapping, do we simply copy and paste that same mapping into our local official plan, or do we simply make reference to some of that mapping? So we will have our own, for example, our own schedule A, which is land use, and we will definitely have our own schedule for wellhead protection areas. But the rest of the mapping, it would be a duplication, and I'm suggesting to council, in my opinion, that we don't simply include all those maps. We just rather make reference to the county official plan. And before we get into that discussion, I'm going to say the same about the text. The text of the county official plan is 244 pages in length. Some of the policies, if we decide to include those policies, it would be a cut and pasting, and it would be essentially the same policies. And we've discussed this with the county. The idea of, rather than being redundant, rather include policies, some simple policies in the official plan, that state, you know, we're incorporating the county mapping, or we want to utilize the county mapping for things like, again, the traditional treaty territory, shale drift, and some of those other features that I just mentioned. And same with the text. Rather than copy and paste the text, we just simply make reference to the upper tier plan. That is common in Ontario. Other municipalities do that. I'm just suggesting, so that we don't come up with a document that's at least 244 pages in length and 8 maps, that we simply make reference to, in some instances, the county official plan. And this is where I need council's comments on that matter.
Barbara?
Can you hear me now?
Now we can. Now we can't.
You muted yourself, Barb.
Okay.
There
we go. Sorry, my apologies. Hello, Ron. I'm in favor of referencing the county, and I just wondered about the electronic version. When we are referring to the county official plan in a specific area, i.e. mapping or a specific policy, would there be a link to the official plan so that an individual who, you know, a council member, a staff member, a member of the public who wanted to go to that specific site didn't have to sift through 244 pages every time?
Yeah, is that in reference to the text or the mapping, or both?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just, yeah, so, and understanding that even those links might change if the official plan changes at the county level.
Yeah. And the nice thing about, thank you, and I included that in my report, if that last part, if the county official plan changes their policies with regard to, say, I don't know, significant woodlands, and they'd only do that because the province told them to change them or told us to change them, then we don't need to amend our own official plan. The county's doing it for us, which is awesome. But to answer your first question, and so let's back up a bit. The county GIS mapping, I'm not sure if all you councilors are on that. You should. It's awesome mapping. But if there's one flaw, and I've talked to Randy a lot of times about this, and brought up, and it's kind of tongue in cheek, about getting the local official plan mapping online. So right now, you can go online and you can turn on all these layers of the county official plan that are on. You can turn on the Southgate zoning bylaw, but you can't turn on the Southgate official plan. They keep telling me someday they'll do that. Someday, hopefully, will come sooner than later. But the good news is, to answer your question, if we adopt the county schedules, basically B, C, and appendices A, B, C, D, E, it's already there. Like if somebody in Southgate knows that there's a significant woodland on the property, they don't have to sift through any paper copy. They can just go on the county GIS mapping, and it's right there. So that's I never thought of that in terms of how the ease of use of the mapping. If we don't have our own mapping, this would be ideal.
Just to add to that, with the one of the reasons why we wanted to have the county prepare the mapping is for just that reason, is to get it to a point where the mapping is available and in a format that they can then just use for the GIS website, and then our mapping will eventually be up on the web, and then we can use it like we do the county mapping. So that's the reasoning we went with the county to do the mapping.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else have any comments? Martin?
$5 in the jar. Good morning, Ron. With this matter, yeah, I'm in total agreement with it. The less redundancy we can get for this would be great. And the fact that we can still be restrictive, and that's important because Grey County is a big county and Southgate is just a small part. There's going to be a lot of different, it's not one region. There's a lot of different topography and settlement areas. And so I'm all for it. If we can do this and not piggyback on the county plan, but certainly stop the redundancy, I think that's great. As you say, if the province changes something, the county changes it, and then it says here, our township OP would be automatically changed. So I think it's great. And we don't need to see 244 pages of text either in ours. So keep it simple for our residents. And if there is that capability to dig further, then good for us. So I'm in total agreement with this part of the report. I think it's a good idea.
Okay. Thanks. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Okay.
John?
Clint, yep. Oh, there you are, Brian. Go ahead.
I was I was going to suggest a contrary view. If I'm a Southgate resident and I'm looking for information on our official plan, would it not make more sense to me that that official plan is all there on one place rather than have to say, oh, now I got to go to the county plan and figure it out there? I'm gonna, if your plan or your proposed change to the official plan is going to involve something that's on the county site, well, why not put it on the Southgate official plan? It's an electronic. Most people are going to use the electronic version. So in terms of length, I don't think it matters much. I'm inclined to think that it would be better if it was all in one place than have to reference another official plan at the county level.
Okay.
And just to be clear, I'm not prepared to die on this hill, but I'm just saying that I think it should be all in one place.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other comments or questions on this? Oh, Barbara?
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Milne makes a good point. If the county were to change something that we weren't prepared to adopt, and we are only referencing the county. So trying to think of an example whereby maybe we're adopting the plan for the number of severances for a certain size of farm lot, and the county decides they're going to double that and allow for 4 or 8. And we don't want to, we still want to limit that. How do we manage when the county changes their official plan and it affects us? Thanks.
Go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, okay, so good question. And we'll get into that in a few minutes, but I had my comment or my suggestion here was not in relation to the rural or agricultural designations. Clint's told me on a number of occasions that council likes to be a little bit more restrictive on a few different things. So I'm not talking about the rural and ag designation policies or the mapping right now. The only thing I was talking about, to be specific, would be the mapping and the policies associated with where the gravel pit, where the aggregate material exists, the natural heritage core and natural heritage linkage mapping, wildfires, karst topography, not wellhead protection because we're going to have our own sites or our own specific policies, woodlands, valley lands, treaty and traditional territories, and shale drift. So if you thought you wanted to be more restrictive with those policies, then I would change my recommendation and say, well, no, I guess we copy and paste the mapping and the text from the county official plan and then tweak it. But as it pertains to land uses in the agricultural or rural designation or lot severances, no, that's a completely different kettle of fish, and we definitely want to have our own policies for that.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? So what's the consensus on which way we would like to go with this? Do we want to go with the cut and paste or use the county mapping? Martin?
Well, with just what Ron said, it just pertains to those 8 appendices, whatever. I'm still in favor for it because, as he said, it's not about our watershed or anything else that's coming up in the report. It was just for those mapping things. So I'm still in favor of getting rid of the redundancy. I can see Brian's point. Don't get me wrong, but you know, I think this would be the way to go. So I'd be in favor.
Okay, Dave?
You will mic back on here. Just to Brian's point, Ron, there would be just a hyperlink to that specific map. Would there not be inserted into our plan? So that the searching portion of looking for something would be very simple.
Yeah, yes, Dave, we can figure that out. That'll require some assistance, but I'm in this day and age of hyperlinks, yeah, that doesn't sound too difficult.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so who's for going with the county mapping? Martin, you said you were. Barb? Mike? Okay, Michael?
I'm just kind of wondering how many within the community of Grey County are going to go this way? Are we going to be the only ones that's going to go with it, or is there a few more of the other townships going to join that we're all going to be the same throughout Grey County?
Go ahead, Ron.
Okay, so to start off with, just going through them really quickly here. So Hanover and Owen Sound are 2 urban areas, so they're a little bit different. Georgian Bluffs does not have an official plan that stretches into the countryside. It's only for the urban areas. West Grey is the same. Their official plan only pertains to Durham and Newstead. So that leaves us Meaford and Grey Highlands, and neither of them, to my knowledge, have updated their official plan just yet. So we're kind of first.
Okay, Barbara?
Thank you. I don't think it's a matter of whether we're adopting the county maps or not. It's whether or not we're going to put a link. I think you're asking, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ron, that you're asking, do we want to copy and paste the mapping into our official plan, or do we want to provide a link, a reference to the mapping at the county level for those 8 items?
Yeah, it's as simple as that. Again,
yeah. We're not going to reinvent the wheel by creating our own mapping.
No, nor are you going to reinvent the wheel by creating your own text that goes with the mapping. And I'm not sitting here trying to convince council one way or another. I'm really not. You know, it's probably simpler, sure, if we just take the approach where we adopt the county policies when it comes to these specific issues, because, you know, at the end of the day, for a lot of that stuff, we do have to follow the county official plan. I mean, when it comes to, for example, significant woodlands, the provincial government tells us what the policies are. Could you be more restrictive? I suppose suppose you could be, but you're probably not going to take that approach.
Thanks. For those 8 items, I'm in favor of providing reference to the county as opposed to copying and pasting, and then every time it changes, you got to copy and paste it and make sure that our official plan is up to date.
Okay. Jim, do you have any strong feelings one way or another?
There's a lot of time and effort has gone into this, and I think that Ron has got it nailed down rather well.
Yep, good. Jason?
Yeah, I'd say just stick with the county ones.
Okay. And we've heard from everyone else. Brian, did you want anything else to say before we move on? Nope. Okay.
Nope,
Yeah,
I'm good.
so good. So we'll go with the county mapping and just the links to it.
Okay, thank you. So moving along, so just very quickly, as council's aware, in the province, we have a 2 designation approach that the province wants us to use for determining land use in the countryside, if you will. So that's what we'll call it, the countryside. If it's prime agricultural land, which is generally considered to be pockets or larger pockets of land that's class 1, 2, or 3 on a scale of 1 to 7, and that scale would be known as CLI, Canada Land Inventory. Those lands would be considered to be prime agricultural land, and they'd be designated agricultural in the county official plan, and therefore agricultural in the local official plan. And the rest of the land would be considered to be rural, and works a rural policy. So there's no change there. There's no change to the mapping. So what's designated agricultural now will remain agricultural, and what's designated rural will remain rural. And then the policies are, I don't want to say completely different in the 2 designations, but they are somewhat different. Certainly in the agricultural designation, the province makes this be a lot more restrictive. In a nutshell, in the agricultural designation, again, on good agricultural land, right now you can sever, the only way you can sever a lot in the agricultural designation basically is if one of 2 ways. If you have 200 acres or more and you want to split into the 2 100-acre parcels, that's fine. And it's all about maintaining a viable farm. And in this area, you know, you can talk all day about what viable farm means. And some farmers will joke about that, I guess, saying nothing's viable. But 100 acres is kind of where everybody draws the line. So that's not changing. And the other one is, and you've probably seen this a few times, what they call a surplus farmhouse. So if you're a bona fide farmer and you buy a second property or a third property or a fourth property, and the new house, or the house on that new property of yours is surplus, you have the ability through a severance and a rezoning process to remove that house in a very small amount of land. And that's not changing, and that comes right from the provincial government, so we can't be more permissive than that. Other than one new thing, and as I put in, the new county official plan allows for small scale commercial and small scale industrial uses. I'm sorry, whoops, got ahead of myself here. They allow for the severance of an agricultural related use. Okay, so for example, if someone has an apple storage and distribution yard on a couple of acres, whereas right now under the current official plan, you can't sever it off. Well, you can change the policies now to allow for that. Another example is a flour or grain mill, a produce or auction yard, an abattoir, or a stock yard. So to be clear, the county official plan now allows for this. It's a simple question. Does council want the new official plan to also allow for this third type of severance opportunity?
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions or discussion on that? Clint?
Just one comment on that. With the way the county does or defines the on-farm diversified uses and whatnot, and the how we zone them, because we spot zone them basically. So in doing that, if we allow a severance, we would probably have to change how we rezone them, which could actually restrict them quite a bit, and bring them closer to the road, because they're only allowed an 8,000 square meters of zoned area, and that could pose some issues with that. That would be my only concern about that policy, is it could actually end up being more restrictive in that regard.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else comments?
John?
Yep, okay, Jim and then Brian.
This policy here is for 40 hectares. The majority of the farms in this neighbourhood are the 100-acre farms. When will some consideration be given to the vast number of 50-acre lots that we have in the township?
Go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, okay. So like the 50-acre lots are recognized, but in terms of being able to create more 50-acre lots in the agricultural designation, I say this respectfully, it would be probably pushing a rope. Probably 10 years ago, Bruce County Council was of the same opinion that or maybe that's not your opinion, I'm not sure, but they didn't like the idea that the farm size, the minimum farm size had to be 100 acres, and they wanted to be 50. And of course, we have Big Brother, which is the province, watching when you do stuff like that. And the bottom line is it did not get approved. The province maintained, they don't tell you in the provincial policy statement that it has to be 100 acres. They don't use a number. But if you phone somebody up at the province and ask them, they likely tell you that, yeah, in Ontario, 100 acres minimum is what we want to see in the agricultural designation.
Go ahead.
If this was something, you know, like now this was not part of today's conversation, but of course it is something, a discussion that council wants to have. But if you did take the approach that you wanted a smaller farm lot, keeping in mind we're being more permissive than the county would be, and therefore we need to amend the county official plan to allow for that.
Okay. Go ahead, Jim.
How did these 50-acre parcels get established in the first place? What was the purpose?
Yeah, well, I'm not 100% familiar with the average lots, the original lot fabric in Southgate. As a planner in Chatsworth and formerly of West Grey, I can tell you that some of the original, what we call crown surveyed lots, for sake of argument, lot 1, concession 1, they were set in 50 acres, 75 acres, 100 acres, 150, 200. So the various sizes. So in some cases, that's how it was done. But the more probably accurate answer is a lot of stuff happened in the 50s, 60s, and 70s and 80s, where, especially in Grey County, where we saw a lot of lot creation, and we didn't have official plans back then. We did in the 80s, but quite often the official plan wasn't followed. So now we have to follow the official plan.
Okay, thank you. Brian?
Thanks, John. I guess I was going to suggest that because those uses are allowed now with an OP amendment, potentially, that there's no reason to change it other than to make it more convenient for the body that wants to change the plan. And some of these uses may or may not be amenable to the surrounding community. So I would be inclined just to leave it there and let them seek the official plan amendment if they so choose.
So just, and if I may, just to be clear then, like those uses would be permitted. It's the severance
Yep.
of those uses on a separate lot.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Brian. I think the way it is now and the having to go through that other process for severance is to me is the right way to go. Any other comments or questions from Martin?
Referring to that, like I agree there. And Clinton, you did say if we went like if we went to that allows a severance, you said it would be more probably be more prohibitive to the person wanting to do it anyway. Is that what you were saying? More restrictive because of related
No,
uses and setbacks? If you could
what I was
clarify
saying
that.
is- Yeah, sure. What I was saying is basically the way we do it now is we spot zone something. So if, for example, a farm is set back 400 meters into the middle of a 100-acre farm, we don't rezone cluster and then all the way to the road when we do it. However, we only just do around the cluster to permit the building, and then the access is fine. The severance for something like that would be the entire area all the way out to the road, because it needs to have a dedicated access if it's a new lot with open and maintained frontage. So that's what I'm talking about, is all of a sudden
Okay.
now we would be pushing things closer to the road to, if we were going to allow these severances like that.
Okay.
That's
Thank you.
the consideration I think.
And that could cause a lot of potential problems.
Well, it would certainly take
With-
agricultural land out of production, because
Yeah.
a lot of times the agricultural land is on either side of the driveway, and that's all of a sudden now going to be part of this new business.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
Okay,
Well, I'd let sleeping dogs lie then, as they say.
okay. Is everyone good with that? Keeping that as the way it is now? Yeah, I'm seeing heads nod. Okay, good. So we'll keep that the way it is now.
Okay. So, excuse me. So the next issue is, this might take a little bit of time. Right now we use the term small scale commercial and small scale industrial. That was in the former official plan for the county, and it's still in the Southgate official plan. Those terms have been changed to reflect the new provincial policy statement. They use terms such as agricultural uses, and agricultural related uses, and the third category is on-farm diversified uses. And just quickly here, I'm going to read, just give you a couple of examples. So an agricultural use, that's pretty much permitted. Like it's an agricultural use and permitted of basically of any size. That would be, you know, the growing of any crops, certainly barns. Other examples are a mushroom farm, Christmas tree farm, greenhouses, cold storage for the farmer's own use. Basically anything that the farmer does for himself or herself is qualified or would qualify as an agricultural use. And then the agricultural related use examples would be apple storage and distribution, farm gate sales, a winery or cidery, a flour mill or local grain operation, farm equipment repair shop, auction for local produce or local livestock. So that's agricultural related use. And then there's on-farm diversified, which is ones that, you know, it's kind of on the fringe, if you will. There's home industries such as sawmill, welding, a vet clinic, a kennel, agritourism and recreational uses such as farm vacation suite, B&Bs, retail uses that like a farm market or an antique business. So having said that, and then if I need to go over that with anybody or anybody wants me to slow down, just say so. So right now under your current official plan, you have, again, small scale commercial and small scale industrial. And 100% of the time, you have to amend the zoning bylaw, and that's not changing. So to be clear, any of these uses would require, or at least under small scale, under on-farm diversified uses and agricultural related uses, it will still require a rezoning. So you'll still get a kick in the can. But right now, the current policies are, I guess you'd consider them to be very restrictive, given what the county has done, and that's based on the provincial government. Right now, you have under your current official plan, a floor area for a commercial or industrial use can be up to 750 square meters, and then outside you can have another 500 square meters of outdoor storage. But that's changed considerably. In the agricultural designation, the province allows you to, it's a mathematical formula, and without sparing it or without giving all the details of how to do the math, you could have up to an 8,000 square meter, not building, but an 8,000 square meter site, which is 2 acres that's used for commercial or industrial purposes. And within that, you could have up to a 1,600 square meter building. So where I'm going with this, guys, and I'm sorry for throwing lots of numbers at you, but right now you have a maximum of 750 square meters of building area. And in some situations, it could be up to you could allow for up to 1,600 square meters if you took the approach that the county takes in their official plan. Now there's different factors. One's the size of the property. Well, that's primarily the main factor is the size of the property. In the agricultural designation, the county official plan actually doesn't allow for any type of on-farm diversified use under 20 hectares. So anyways, I guess the question here is in the agricultural designation, and we'll have that same discussion in the rural designation, do we want the official plan to reflect what the PPS and the county OP has to say? Or do we start getting nervous with the buildings and operations of that size? And this is where we need to have a good discussion about this.
Okay, thank you. Any thoughts? Martin?
Yeah, going to this big size of buildings, they are becoming more factories, and I guess that's where the province wants to go, because they are trying to get the economy going all over, especially before COVID. If we decide to go with this and have the bigger buildings, again, it is taking away agricultural land, but then you have to look at the collateral damage. If they're having big shops this size, obviously they're going to be making more stuff. There's going to be more trucks. So that's the way I'm looking at this. The size of not the size of the building, but the size of the operation and what it's going to do to our other infrastructure. Like the roads are becoming torn up with the trucks that are on the roads now. So I'd like to see the smaller operations myself, because there are a lot of other collateral damage that comes from this. So that's a big chunk of land and a big building. That is not a small operation. That's a factory. So again, the collateral damage of our other infrastructure, the roads and what have you. So I'd be more inclined to allow just for the smaller operations on that merit alone, as far as roads.
Okay. Anyone else have any ideas, thoughts?
John?
Brian? Yep, go ahead, Brian.
Thanks, John. Ron, do you not think that if we went to allowing commercial or industrial uses of this size, we're now going to start competing rural against your industrial park or industrial lands in the urban center?
Good point.
Your taxes that you can apply to an area in the rural area would not be enough to cover, as Martin has said, perhaps some of the ancillary costs that come with the industrial uses, trucks being the off-cited one. But we have an industrial park in Dundalk in our case, and we've put a lot of time and energy into developing that eco park in town. To now go to encouraging larger operations out in the rural areas, you're basically saying, well, don't bother going to town where all the infrastructure already exists for these larger businesses. So I'm inclined to agree with Martin that I don't think we want to go this route. At least I don't think we do. I don't. Those are my comments.
And I don't.
Okay. Go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, so there was a question there directed to me because I heard my name mentioned at the beginning, right? In 3 words, I don't disagree. You can talk to planners, and I'm sure you can talk to the politicians. When the province came out with some of these new policies, and then the county started turning them into their local, turning that policy into county policy, I've had discussions with other people, and I'm sure Clint has as well. And to be honest, surprised is the word that was used. I mean, wow! Like, I mean, have we really gone this far in allowing for, on the one hand, you know, prime agricultural land? It's really hard to sever a lot off. But if you wanted to have a 2-acre, whatever commercial use, even though it requires a rezoning, but the OP does allow for it. Yeah, I guess permission to speak frankly, but yeah, that came as a big surprise when we got this permissive in Ontario and in Grey County. And yes, it would. It's one thing to allow for, I suppose, the smaller scale ones, but you've got your own industrial park. I don't know, you know, maybe this isn't fair for me to say, but why would a person ever buy land in an industrial park if they can buy themselves a rural location, live on it, and at very little extra cost? I mean, in terms of buying land anyways, because there's no extra cost. Why would they think about going into an urban area?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Barbara? No, you're not coming through.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Sure. Yep.
I'm having some internet issues. I suppose I can hear what you're saying, and I agree fully. Why would you purchase industrial land when you can, you know, buy a farm and have your plant out there? And one of my questions was, if we were to be less restrictive and allow for a larger on-farm diversified use facility, let's say, would we be able, and not that I'm supportive of it, would we be able to restrict the number of farms that would be eligible for that? So right now we have a lot of smaller on-farm diversified uses setting up shops side by side by side, and they're transporting goods from shop to shop to shop using skid steers. I was behind 3 of them yesterday. Not saying that is the standard. And then you have trucks picking up goods from one shop and going to another. Would by allowing for a larger on-farm diversified use, where it still remains secondary to the farming operation, which is the definition, would we be able to restrict the number of farms that would be eligible for that size of shop? Is I guess, and I think I know the answer, and I think the answer would be no. We wouldn't have that ability, but Clinton may be able to help me out there. I'm not in favor of having, huge 8,000, well, up to 2 acres, 1,600 meter squared facilities, which is more than double of what we allow now, unless we include the outside storage. That's my thoughts, and kind of going along what Martin was saying, our roads, and if we had a larger shop, there would be fewer trucks going to multiple shops. They would just be coming to one shop. Kind of trying to balance my thought process here. Thank you.
Okay. I don't know whether you want to handle that question or Ron.
I can tackle that if you'd like.
Sure.
The short answer is I don't believe you can restrict it like that. The only possible way would be to have some sort of density provision to say if there was another one within, I don't know, 500 meters and you couldn't have a second one put up, so that there's policy maybe you might be able to put in, but just first of all, that would be a nightmare to try and regulate and whatnot. But it
Right.
also is not, in my opinion, a very fair policy, because why are you allowing one and not the neighbor? Like, do we not like him, or what's the case there? So I just don't think it's fair. But I don't know if Ron has anything to add to that.
Go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, no, I echo that. In fact, I had written down a nightmare administratively yes, it would be really hard to control something like that. Could you do it? I don't know. I suppose you could try, but that's not the approach I would recommend you take. I think if this is a concern, I think you go with plan A, which is to allow anybody to do it where they qualify, but on a much smaller scale basis.
I agree, and that you've answered my question as far as, whether or not it would be a nightmare to enforce as well as to administer. But to the point of traffic, and maybe we need to also start looking about cumulative effect and the number of shops that when do we reach that threshold of saturation. But in this case, I would prefer to remain more restrictive in size than to open it up for a huge plant that we may as well shut the industrial part down in that sense.
Okay, thank you. Jason?
I guess I'm kind of on the other side of the fence, coming from an agriculture background. We throw that word around a lot, save the agriculture land. These shops that have came around, and I'm not saying put up a Honda, but to double the size of some of these shops here, those farms before were falling down. We were getting no tax revenue off them at all. Look at the taxes they're bringing in, as well as the economic. We talk about the trucks on the road, but if we don't put a shop there, and I'm a farmer, a large cash crop guy buys it, he's going to be going in with heavier trucks all the time. So the road thing, to me, that the trucks, and maybe I'm biased because I'm also a trucker, but the trucks are not what's the roads problem. Some of the roads were not built to begin with right, and yeah, they do wear and tear. But I don't know. I just there's a lot of economic spin-off. I understand we want to keep it in the eco park, but the trucking companies, the people that are working in these plants, it's unreal the amount of money moving out there every day. And I just think the taxes we're getting off those 100 acres, if they're sitting falling down like half them were before, You know, I don't know. Like I said, I don't want a Honda there either, but I think we could go a little bigger, and that's just my opinion.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Oh, Ron, go ahead.
If I may, and go through you, Mr. Chair, if I can ask Clint the question, because he's probably got his finger on the pulse of this better than anybody else. Has that number, Clint, worked to date? Have you seen official plan amendments for above and beyond what's allowed now, which is the 750 square meter building?
For everything I've heard from individuals going forward, say that number works for them, the 750. Originally, when we first started doing the rezonings, we would rezone to a very specific number. So I want to say 600 square meters was the average. And we stopped doing that because then anytime they wanted to do an expansion, we'd have to go through the zoning exercise again. So we just said it would allow up to 750 square meters building, and then they could build whatever they wanted. Most of them don't get that big. Most of them are less. There are a few exceptions. If it's a sawmill or something that requires a lot of outside storage, or the metal ones which require a lot of inside storage, they can get bigger, but for the most part, that number has actually worked really well for them.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah. If I may, so I guess sort of like one approach, and of course everybody understands this, is if you came up with a new number, or the new number was the same number, but it wasn't exactly what the county allows for, keeping in mind, I guess, if you ever had a unique situation, or a situation, I guess, with extenuating circumstances where it does make a lot of sense for them to go a bit bigger than whatever number you chose, there's always that option of doing an official plan amendment. And I'm not a big fan of saying, oh, well, let's make everybody go through an official plan amendment process, because it's a lot of work, and some people would say that's red tape. But yes, that is certainly an option.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think that the idea of staying with our present number, but somebody having the ability to build bigger through an amendment would be, to me, be favorable. Dave, you had something to add to that, and then I've got Jason. You might be muted.
That was a really good statement too. Clint and I know of some locations where there's a father and a couple sons, and instead of building one plant, they build one in each of the 3 locations. So I think Ron's comment about official plan amendment, is that the best way to go? I'm not sure. I guess that's for discussion, but would there be greater efficiencies? Would it be better for climate change if those 3 facilities were amalgamated into one location, and they used the other 2 properties, and they were sterilized maybe from building another shop? But anyway, that's a discussion. One thing I want to bring up is, should we consider some of this great planning that was done back in the 60s when Clint and Ron not likely were in planning, these checkerboard farms that created 10-acre lots? Should we be looking at some options to develop those, because they're just sitting there doing nothing? And would a person that has interest in having a shop or a garden type development with their shop for farm gate sales, would that be a way to develop these specific locations that are lots of record, rather than have them sit there and they're being owned by people that likely thought they paid too much for it? But anyway, that's another discussion. There's a lot of lots of record on these checkerboard farm lots that were created in the 60s doing nothing.
Okay. Thank you. Jason.
Well, I agree with the comment about the red tape. That's like let's cut the restrictions. Let's people, there's so much red tape with everything nowadays, and I agree with Dave on those lots too. Like let's do something with them. It just, The red tape comment, I like that. Let's cut the red tape and let people grow and get at it.
Yep, I agree. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none, the way I read this is majority wants to stay with the 750, but we'll look at anybody that wants to come do an official plan amendment with larger. Is that how most feel? Okay, I don't hear any yelling and screaming, so we'll go with that. Ron?
Okay, that's good to hear. The next part under rural, I don't think we have to really spend, or at least the first part of it anyways, really any more time on that. It's the same thing about how big of buildings do we want to go for agricultural use, agricultural related use, and on-farm diversified. The county broke it down into agricultural and rural, and the only difference is in the ag designation. If you're under 50 acres in size, they didn't allow you to do on-farm diversified. But in the rural designation, if you're under 50 acres in size, then you can build up to a certain size. I don't know if there's any need for further discussion on this. I think, you know, this is where we go back, we prepare the official plan and continue to work on it. And you guys will get obviously several more kicks at the cat to make sure that you're fine with all the wordsmithing that we have to do now with this. Does that seem fair?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm getting thumbs up and heads nodding, so.
Okay. The next thing is, this is just a matter, I guess, of again, another one that we, you know, toss a coin or have a and then have a good debate over this. But all of a sudden, the county official plan in the rural designation, not the ag, so the rural, it's a lot more permissive in terms of lot creation than what you allow right now in your own official plan. In your own official plan, it's one lot to be severed off from an original 40 hectare or 100 acre land lot. The county official plan was always more permissive than that. And then just recently it got even more permissive. So as you can see in my bullet points there, just, and you know, 20 hectares is 50 acres. And if you want me to just do it in Imperial. So if you have a 50 acre parcel, you can, in the county OP under rural, you can sever one lot off and retain a lot. Now this is per original township lot. If you have a 100 acre original lot, you can sever off 3 lots and retain a 4th. And if it's 150, you can sever off 4 lots and retain a 5th. And if it's a 200 acre original lot, you can sever off 5 lots and retain a 6th. So just so it's clear, if somebody came in and asked Clint, you know, how many lots they can sever, Clint would take a look at the original lot 1 concession 1, determine how big it was, and if it was an original 100 acres, Clint would say, well, we can entertain up to 4 lots or 3 severances in a retained parcel. And once you and anybody else that owns that original lot 1 concession 1, once you've hit that maximum density, then there's no more severances allowed. So long story short, you got a decision to make here, how permissive you want to get with lot creation in the rural designation.
Okay, Michael?
I'd say with today's market, with the amount of lack of property around that people can afford, I think this is something that we need to look at. And you know, if we can get an extra lot or 2 out of some of these places out there that's not maybe your top-notch agricultural land, I think we really need to look at it. Maybe it'll help drive down some of the house pricing if people can, you know, get out there and find a piece of property to expand, because we definitely need more houses. There's no doubt about that.
Okay.
The one thing, if I may, just just right now is, of course, just because the rural density policies would allow for this, it doesn't mean that you're exempt from the other check boxes. For example, and this is a good one because Southgate, just like your abutting municipalities of Westgrade and Chatsworth, or Westgrade, pardon me, you've got a lot of aggregate constraint mapping. So if you have your property, it qualifies for severance in terms of the density, but it shows up as having potential for sand and gravel underneath it, as identified on one of the maps of the official plan, then you're out of luck. You don't get to sever a lot anyway. So I thought I'd throw that in there.
Okay. Any other, Martin?
Yeah, and it actually will come, like this is very subjective because my lot's a strip 50. There's no way I'd be able to get any more because just road frontage wouldn't allow it. The one I have is more than I can have. So it's very subjective on the actual, the way it's laid out too, is it not? So it comes into it. There's a lot of things that come into play. I do like Michael's comment about if the density would allow it to have maybe more than the 2 or the whatever, because there is that shortage of land to build on. But yeah, that's about it from me.
Okay. Any other?
It's a lot.
Any other comments, Barbara?
Thank you. I can see the point of allowing the severances in a rural designation to maybe not as permissive as the official plan, especially when farm families, their children are having trouble getting housing to move, get a little bit separate. They're growing up, they're starting families of their own. In that way, it may eliminate the need for them to apply for a 20-year garden suite, whereby they might be able to sever off a lot for their children and then put the house on that. But we end up having to consider MDS setbacks. We don't want to create additional nuisance factors to the farming itself. So I'm kind of on the fence as to whether or not, I certainly wouldn't want to be as permissive as the county is suggesting. I think we end up with a number of those checkerboard or strip development, and then you sterilize the farm from being able to expand their nutrient units or something. Something to think about.
Okay.
Yeah, good point, Barb.
Just echoing a little bit of what Barb was saying, but also adding a different perspective. Any lots in the rural area will have some sort of impact on agriculture, and to say we're out of lots in town or out of land, and therefore we should just create more for our sons or daughters or what have you. That's a dead end road, because what happens then is you've created a lot for your son. They have a family, and then what happens to them? Do they then get to create more lots for their family? Eventually it comes to a point where all you're doing is severing lots for people. It's the agricultural land is the first and foremost importance, even in the rural area. Yes, it's considered lower class, but at the same time, those lands can be improved through grading and drainage, tile draining, that sort of thing. So, and some of the mapping, as Dave knows, is not always that accurate, where it's maybe better land in the rural area than in the ag lands. Typically, lots in the rural area have implications on farms in terms of barns and expanding barn operations, but also on the shops that we just finished talking about. It creates another potential conflict where somebody is there. It might be fine for the people there right now, but eventually that house gets sold to somebody else. That person doesn't like the on-farm shop or what have you. It becomes a conflict, and so you introduce more conflicts than you need. And then I haven't even touched on aggregates yet.
Right.
Ron mentioned we have lots of aggregates in the area, and when you have individuals in the rural area, they tend not to like aggregates. Unfortunately, aggregates can't be anywhere else because you can't have them in town. So they got to be where the resource is. So the township, in my opinion, has done a really good job up to this point of keeping to their policy. They have made a couple exceptions here and there in the past through an official plan amendment process, but it has been good for reducing those conflicts. When we go to public meetings, we don't get a lot of outcry necessarily about some of these things, and that's because we have done such a good job. I've been in other municipalities where it's the opposite, and there is lots of opposition to certain things.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to bring that perspective to council as well.
Just a follow up.
Yep. Go ahead, Barb.
So I agree, and I certainly, as I said, I wouldn't want to be more be so open that you're allowing all these additional lots, and it would still be restricted based on the original lot fabric. So you sever off a lot for your child, and then the child is wanting to sever off a lot for their child. That wouldn't happen, we would sure it wouldn't happen by policy. But I think I agree with you, Clinton. We have a good system. We can entertain exceptions on and one-off or whenever those come up, but to just say, okay, we're going to allow, a lot severance for every 50 acres, that's just going to create more conflict. So I agree with you, Clinton. I think the township has done a really good job of managing it thus far.
Okay, Dave?
Yeah, a few comments here. From a standpoint of when you look at 4 lots off 40 hectares, that would be about 8 acres off a 100-acre farm. And to me, even the size of these lots at 2 acres, I know that's the policy, but it's very wasteful as far as housing development and the consumption of agriculture land. The other comment I would make is Clint kind of touched on it a wee bit, but sometimes our ag designations and our rural designations are a wee bit off because it was done years ago when, again, there wasn't a lot of planning. It was done more by municipal office staff just putting those designations on land. Is there a way to review some of those designations and either upgrade them or downgrade them or whatever you might say and make ag rural and rural ag in some cases, because there is sure some deficiencies in it, and I won't go on in detail, but the more lots you add, the more you complicate MDS and the sterilization of farmland that we do have in its future development, because farm technologies have to be improved in order to be competitive, and sometimes these lots of record that are sitting on properties just don't allow that future type of development.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have any comments? Jason?
John?
And then Brian?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay.
I tend to agree with Mike too. I'd like to see, I don't want 4 lots off a 100-acre parcel, but maybe 2. And like we said about a farmer and his son wants to sever a house, or maybe the father wants to retire and stay there. I think we're a little restrictive on that. I would like to see maybe 2. And as I said before, and being a farmer, this agricultural designation gets thrown around a lot, and it's not, if a guy decides to take a lot off his farm, it's not going to affect him, the farming operation at all. He knows what's happening there, or they know what's happening. And as far as being sold down the road, if someone else comes in and buys it, well, he was there first, the rule was made then. Too bad. I'd like to see maybe a couple more, because I know of a few cases where that had happened, where the guy wants to sever a lot or two, and they've lived here all their lives, paid taxes, and contributed to the community, and then they can't get a lot to build a house on and retire. And I don't think that's right. It's just the same thing, just restrictive. And I'd like to see a couple, like Mike said.
Okay, thank you. Brian?
Thank you, John. I've never really been a big fan of the designation. Farmland is farmland. The old saying is that there's no poor farmland, just poor farmers. A good farmer can make a living off pretty stony land, and there's lots of them in Grey County. But that said, we've been down this road before with retirement lots, if you think back to the 70s and 80s. And if I recall correctly, the statistics at that time showed that when the farmer retired to that farm lot out in front of the farm, the average was that they stayed there for 5 years. And then somebody else, usually outside the family and usually outside agriculture, bought that lot. And then the scrap's on because of the noise, the dust. The kitty litter gets thrown over the fence into the farm field. It's more demand for school buses, police patrols. It just goes on and on and on. I'm not in favor of increasing the density of lots in the township. I do understand Mike's concern, or Mike's point about trying to make more lots available to bring the price down. And I think that was part of the reason why the county made it less restrictive. But I would need an economist to show me how that would affect the price of the lots. I doubt it would, but it may. Supply and demand is always there, I'm sure. But I agree with Clint. We've done a pretty good job. And I dare say that there's lots of municipalities that look at us with envy, how we've managed these rural lots. And you don't need to look too far to see where the conflicts are and how many they are and how detrimental they can be to the community. I'm fully in favor of housing densification in the urban areas where they're full services. I don't like to see them out in the farm areas, the rural areas. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? So let's run through council and see where we're landing on this. I'm in favor of keeping it as it is now. I think there was a lot of work put into reasoning behind that in the past, and I do agree that I think it's worked well. Having said that, if somebody wants more than what we're going to allow, they can always go for an official plan amendment and see. But I think just the basis of where we are is good. So Jim, which side of the fence are you landing on?
I think the numbers are just a wee bit too high. I think we should go for 1 per lot. 6 is just too many.
Yeah, okay. And Brian, we heard where you are. Michael, you had something?
When you say they could apply, so say Jason out there with 100 acres, he could apply to get 2 building lots on his property. Even though we say we're only going to give you 1, he could actually do an official plan amendment that say that in the back corner, that he could get another one over there. I mean, I don't have a problem with that as long as it's not, an issue.
That's my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong. Ron, go ahead.
Okay, if I may, and this is a planner speaking, and I think maybe Clint would agree with me on this. You know, earlier I talked about, you know, the option, we've talked about this 3 times now, the option for someone to apply for an official plan amendment. And, you know, where there's extenuating circumstances. And I can see that, you know, maybe again, when we talked about the earlier topic, which is the on-farm diversified use. But when it comes to rural severances, I think at least planners anyways are going to be a little bit more uptight about applying for an official plan amendment. I mean, in my mind, for the most part, you set a policy that says 2 lots per 100 acres or 3 lots per 100 acres, and you stick with it. Now, of course, I won't be your municipal planner. Clint will be, you know, dealing with this for the next 30, 35 years. But again, it's one of those things where it's my own gut feeling is, or my own thought is, and repeating myself is, don't really see. Yes, they can apply to amend the official plan. They absolutely can. Whether or not it's appropriate to just, oh well, they want another lot, so let's give it to them. I myself, I wouldn't be so supportive of an official plan amendment for an additional lot in a rural area. I would kind of think you make the decision for the most part now and try to live by it. I just want to say that, Michael, just so you understand sort of what my line of thinking is on this one. Clint, I don't know if you, and through you, Mr. Chair, I don't know if Clint has anything to add to that, or if he disagrees completely with me.
Through the chair, no, I agree. If you're going to set a policy, set a policy. If you say it's going to be 1 lot or 2 lots, and they come in for 3, my recommendation to council when it comes forward is going to be no, because it doesn't meet policy. And then that's when you guys would have to come in and say, yes, we're going to approve it anyways or not. And so it puts the planner in a position where they're going to recommend what policy is, and then council is going to either support the planner or say no. They don't agree with it. So I'm more along with Ron. Set your policy and move on.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so where do you sit on things then, Michael? What would you like?
I would like at least 2 lots per 100 acres.
Okay. Barbara?
This is for rural designation, which
Yes.
is questionable as to like as Brian said, you know, farmland can be good if you are a good farmer. I see this as creating more conflict and an enforcement issue down the road. The setting the policy at 1, just hear me out, if we set the policy at 1 lot per 100 acres, you can't, if you have 50 acres, even if it was a wide lot, you can't sever off a lot. Correct, Clinton?
If the policy is 1 per 100 and you've already split the 100 into 250s, then the answer would be you wouldn't be able to.
Correct. Okay, because assuming that they were all originally 100 acres, and if you have a 50-acre parcel, then that's already the severance. And they could apply for an amendment if it made sense and it was good planning and it met all the criteria. That, you know, then there's that option. And we've looked at mitigating any conflicts down the road. I understand the need to allow for someone who has got this 100 acres and wants to sever off 2 lots and it makes sense from a, location perspective, and do they have to be a minimum of 2 acres? Can they just be 1 acre lots? Like there's just so many questions that I don't have answers to. Like, is there a minimum lot that you have to sever? What if somebody wants to sever off 10 acres?
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so we couldn't be more, okay, so the first question is minimum size. It has to be 2 acres or 0.8 hectares. That's in the county official plan, so we can't be more permissive than that.
Okay.
Now, in terms of lot maximum, another good question. The county official plan has a policy, and it's a kind of a weak policy that discourages the use of farmland when you're creating a new lot unless there's no alternative. And what that means is, and it goes on to explain, the alternative shall be on the property. So, for example, if you have 100 acres and you want to sever off, and it's all farmland, you can sever off 2 acres, really no questions asked. If you have 90 acres of farmland and 10 acres of not so good land, then the policy would direct you to the not so good land. Now, you could also have a policy in there that, really discourages you from going much larger than 2 hectares. But I can tell you, again, as the planner for Chatsworth, and then of course West Grade, which you gave up last year after about 16 years, it's unfortunate, but yeah, you see a lot of 5-10 acre lots being created, not necessarily of agricultural land, but you're still seeing 5 and 10 acre lots being created in the countryside. So if whatever approach you take on lots, the number of lots, you can also try to make sure that the lots are of a small size, but minimum 2 acres.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
And
Deborah?
a minimum.
Yep.
So, and 2 acres, our bylaw for chickens requires it to be 2.5 acres. So, anyway, in the urban setting, right, Clinton? I say leave well enough alone. If it isn't broken, don't fix it.
Okay. Jason, you'd like to see it changed?
I think I would still like the 2 per 100. Yeah. And I just had a question, like with the rural designation and the agriculture designation, how we said before, it was just done, somebody in the municipal office decided what it was. So if you have a farm side by side, the guy, one's agriculture, one's rural, like how is that fair that this guy, just to me, can we change that? Is that something we could ever change again, or?
I'll answer that. So you're right, and that's a question, Jason, that I get asked a lot in Chatsworth. Well, the guy down the road from me is he just created 2 lots, and how come I can't? And then you try to explain to a layperson, the 2 designation approach, and then it's based on good agricultural land versus not so good, and they just kind of look at you like you have a third eye, right? Because, well, they're saying, well, the farm's it's the same farm, or saying in their mind it's the same soil type and the same ability to or capability to farm. This, I know Dave touched on this a couple of minutes ago. If we're going to start changing land use designations, that has to start with the county. There's a process to go through. The acronym is LEAR, L-E-A-R, I believe, or maybe Clint can remember what it stands for, and I can't. But I would say at this point, we don't do that because our designations have to line up with the county designations. At some point, I guess if the county is ever interested in start changing some of that, that's where the township would get involved. But at this, I would say this isn't the time to be doing that, because then we're looking at amending the county official plan and getting an agricultural expert involved and demonstrating that the mapping is essentially wrong. Glenn, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that.
Not really, no. Right, it is a Lear study. I don't know what it's called either, but I do know it's expensive and it can't be just a one parcel deal. You have to look at all of the ag and rural lands within a municipality. Preferably, you do it at a county level because they have that mapping as well. So if this is something council wants to look at, it would be best in future to do it when the county updates their OP and push for that Lear study at that time. It's a big push because not all municipalities want to pay for that, and it would be across the board. So you might get away with just doing it for our municipality, but then you're on the hook for the entire cost.
Okay, Dave?
So I heard you're going to be here for another 35 years, Clint. So maybe you can shed some light on, would there be value in even going through that Lear study, and what would the expense be? Are we talking 10,000 or 100,000?
Well, for the whole county or for the whole township, I couldn't tell you. I'm not a agrologist. That's who you would have to hire to do that. But to do the whole township, I would say it would be closer to the 100,000 than it would be to the 20,000. I would also say that it may work to your disadvantage. If you're trying to get more rural area versus agricultural area, it depends what your goal is, I suppose. But if you're trying to get more rural area so you can get more lots, it may turn around and say, well, you've improved this farmland so much, it's now in prime ag area. And then you're to the more restrictive policies. So then you're going to get some individuals who have been put in ag lands thinking that they can do severances who are now not able to. So it's a double-edged sword. It can work both ways.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Barb?
Hopefully one last question then. If we were to allow for 2 lots per 100 acres, would that open the gates for inquiries of those who have a 50-acre parcel that can prove, frontage measurements and, a viable lot? Would that then allow for 1 lot per 50 acres if the conditions could be met, whatever those conditions are?
Sure. So yeah, if for example, when we're talking about 2 lots per 100 acres, so we're talking about 2 separate lots. So that would give you 3 lots in total. When Clint starts counting, when someone comes in and inquires, he starts looking at the original township lot. And so if for example, yes, if you did 3 lots per original 100 acres, which is including the retained parcel, so you're severing 1 off per original 100 acres, basically. You prorate it. So prorating that number is easy because if you had an original 50 acres, 1 lot could be severed off. Yes. If they, like you said, if they pass all the other tests of a severance, if that's the number you choose. If you went with the current process of if you've got you can only sever 1 lot from an original 100 acres and the person had an original 50 and it's still intact, the answer is no. There would be no severance on that 50-acre parcel.
Right. I'm just thinking that it could open the floodgates for people who, well, why can't I get a severance now? So I'm just thinking of the number of inquiries that Clinton might have to consider.
Well, he's got 35 years to deal with them, so that'd be okay. Go ahead, Clint.
Well, I do have to put my kids through university, so I might end up having to work that long. I can guarantee you, because we have done so well, there will be an increase in inquiries for sure with regard to consent policy if you increase it. When the county increased their numbers, the number of inquiries I got increased significantly at the start because they thought that meant they got more. And they didn't realize that the township policy was more restrictive. So there is a little bit of because let's look at it this way. It's for those that are looking for that quick and easy money, this is the way to unlock that capital in your farm investment. And that's how they do it. And it becomes a money-making thing for them, as opposed to the idea is that it's for my son or for my daughter or what have you. All of that aside, planning doesn't look at relationships like that. It looks at the lot fabric, and it becomes a moneymaker for people. And so that's what ends up happening. And it fragments the countryside more, plain and simple. And with respect to the 50 acres, if we had a policy for 1 or 2 per 100, what would end up happening is if you had the 50, if it was divided into 2 50s, only one of the 50s would get the severance. The second one wouldn't. So it would be a first come, first serve, in which case,
that's what I thought.
in which case we would sit there and say, well, sorry, your neighbor got there first.
Right.
If it's just based on 1 per 100 and we don't prorate it back or anything like that. So that's how our current policy sort of works. It's 1 per 100 and that's it.
Okay.
If I may, just again to circle back, if we allow 1 lot, 1 severance per 100 acres, with an official plan amendment of they can apply for 2, but once it's separated into 2 50-acre parcels, I mean, if you had 100 acres and you severed off 2 acres and then came back and said, I want to consider another 2-acre parcel, that would have to come back and that would have to meet all of those. It would have to be a consideration under an amendment. So there's the opportunity of increasing it to 2 if it meets all of the criteria, if we were to still be restrictive. I know that it's not making it easy and it's not eliminating the red tape. So.
Okay. Martin, where do you land on this?
Well, I think the numbers from the county are pretty permissive. And the whole idea of having our own plan, official plan, is to do what's right for our township. And they are pretty permissive. I think we've been doing a good job. And as long as there's that person's right to go over and apply for an amendment, according to the Grey County official plan, that's fine. That's their choice. But I think right now the status quo, I think with the 1 per 100, with an amendment on their part, if they want to do something different, go over our official plan head kind of thing. So I'm for keeping it as it is. They're too permissive, I think. It could cause a lot of trouble. It could cause a lot of trouble down the road, and that's why we're doing the official plan now. We're looking down the road.
Yeah,
I guess. Okay.
So we should always be doing, is looking down the road. And just to be clear, both Clint and Ron said that although somebody could technically apply for an amendment, it probably wouldn't be supported because it doesn't follow into our policies. But it would.
But they still have the right to do that, though, just like any severance, right? So it'd be on their part, not our part.
Right.
And it would be the part of council of the day to just make that decision.
Yeah. Okay, so we have the majority that says that they'd like to keep the status quo for this. So we can move on to the next one.
Okay,
Oh, Dave? Go ahead,
thank
Dave.
you.
I didn't want to impact the discussion related to this, but 2 acres of land in a residential subdivision would yield you between 12 and 20 homes based on frontage, just to put it in perspective. So if you really want to create residential development, that's the better place to focus.
Yeah.
I feel obligated to spend 30 more seconds on this and hear me out on this one. The reason why the numbers jumped in the official plan, and Clint might know this, and same with anybody that was on county council 3 years ago, and we can blame Chatsworth for that. And yes, you can go and speak to the mayor and say Ron Davidson had some things to say about Chatsworth. Very simply, nothing happens in Chatsworth. We don't have an urban community where there's water and sewer. There's no development. Nothing happens there. So the former mayor took me aside when the county was very close to adopting the new official plan and said, Ron, how do we get more lots created out in the countryside? And so we had this lengthy discussion. Planners are never going to think that lot creation in the countryside is a good thing. Clint's alluded to that. Brian Milnes alluded to that. It gets in the way of everything. But anyways, long story short, the former mayor and deputy mayor for Chatsworth went to county council and asked at the last second that the official plan be amended to allow for 5 lots per original 100 acres instead of the 3 lots, and county council settled on 4. So there's your history. Don't know if you care, but blame Chatsworth. But the moral of the story here is it was there because Chatsworth thought it could be a way of stimulating the economy, I guess, or getting people to do something in Chatsworth. Would you call that good planning? No. Anyways, there. Sorry, that's a little bit longer than 30 seconds, and sorry if that got preachy. So
no, that's okay. We blame Scott Mackey in Chatsworth for a lot of things, or I do anyway.
Bob Pringle that was doing most of the talking back then, but they even got to the point where they just didn't want to have a number at all. I think I might have left the room at that point. So Dundalk, right now you're moving on. Your official plan, recognizes the township as pretty much a rural community with, you've got some urban settlement areas, but you're an agricultural community. Well, you are, but as you're well aware, that has changed considerably. Dundalk is Clint, the second fastest growing urban center, I think, in Grey County, or if not the fastest growing. So there's really not much to discuss here other than, the official plan is going to certainly have a good focus on Dundalk being a primary settlement area and trying to make it more of a complete community in terms of trying to encourage, not just residential. You just don't want to be a bedroom community, but commercial, industrial, open space uses and those types of facilities. One thing that's the county suggested in the conversation that Clint and I had with them last week or 2 weeks ago was that we might want to just identify where our future expansion area is outside of Dundalk boundaries. It would still require an official plan amendment later, but it's kind of just a place setter or whatever you call that, where this is likely where we're going to grow in the future. I'm not sure if there's any need for a discussion on that. Clint and I will come up with, we'll show that on a map, and the council will have an opportunity to discuss that. But that seems to make sense. And then at the same time, in speaking with Clint, there's some desire, I believe, or interest in maybe expanding the urban boundaries now for more industrial or employment, whatever term you want to use, employment use. And if that was the case, yeah, we recognize that. That would definitely require an amendment to the County of Grey official plan now if we expand the urban boundaries. Again, to be clear, we would only expand it for the purpose of industrial purposes, because the county is telling us there's just right now, there's not a need to expand it for residential purposes. Clint, is there anything you'd like to jump in at right now on this topic?
No, other than just to say, this is what we're talking primarily about is the lands that the township owns adjacent to Highway 10 that we would consider including at this time, and then amend the county official plan.
I don't know if there's any comments on that matter, or if I just move to the next topic.
No, I think we can move on.
Okay, so of course you have other settlement areas that are unserviced. Really nothing's changing there. The boundaries aren't changing. There's a little bit of tweaking to reflect the county official plan. I mean, just a small amount. That's not a big deal. The policies really don't change. Development can take place. You can have subdivisions in those urban areas. And at one time, I would have laughed at people that, you know, some of these smaller villages would be the subject of a plan of subdivision. But now I don't laugh at that anymore, because we are starting to see that. There's one in just west of Owen Sound in Kilsyth, where it's 30 or 40 new residential lots that were just created and being built on. So you never know. You just never know. You might see some development in those communities. But ideally, though, you know, you've got water and sewer in Dundalk. That's generally where the official plan would be directing urban growth. Moving on, second dwelling units. So this is something that's near and dear to the heart of the provincial government. They told us a few years ago, please change your official plans and your zoning bylaws to allow for where you feel it is appropriate. Second dwelling units. You can call them whatever you want, but that's the term, second or secondary. They come in two forms. One is an apartment within an existing dwelling. That dwelling could either be a single family dwelling, a semi, or a townhouse, or it can be in a separate accessory building. So basically a second house on the property. Now, typically you get into the fine details of when and where you're going to permit these, but in the zone, and you put that in your zoning bylaw, but you probably should have give some direction in your official plan. Yeah, and I don't know if presumably everybody has read what I wrote there. In my opinion, putting a second dwelling, or in other words, an apartment within an existing detached dwelling or a new detached dwelling, that would seem appropriate in just about every zone where you have either full municipal services or at least a large enough lot to accommodate the private services. Not so sure if you know, that this is kind of a bigger city thing, folks. Allowing for an apartment unit within a semi or a townhouse. I'm not supposed to say this. I'm supposed to encourage your council to allow for this, or at least pick places to allow for it. But if you have a new subdivision and you have, say, a whole street of townhouses, and then you have a provision in your zoning bylaw that says, oh, in addition to the townhouse, you can also have a second dwelling. You can have an apartment unit on the main floor, upstairs, or in the basement, whatever. That one word comes to mind, and that's congestion and parking. I mean, you're going to have the street's going to look like a parking lot. And by street, I mean your front lawn. You know, so again, some of this detail is best left to the zoning bylaw, but we probably should give some direction in the official plan. You know, maybe council has a policy, or maybe the official plan has a policy that talks about, yeah, you can possibly consider a secondary dwelling unit in an existing, or pardon me, in a house or a townhouse or a semi in certain circumstances. Maybe that's a new subdivision, so everybody knows going in what they're buying into. So we kind of need to have a discussion on that. And then the other type of second dwelling units is where it's a separate structure. So you know, be it a smaller building on the same property or above a garage or something like that. Usually you see a second unit not in an urban area. I mean, the lots are kind of small, and I'm not sure, maybe it's a personal preference, but for me, I don't know if I'd want to have my neighbor have a bunkie or whatever you want to call it in his backyard where grandma's living full time. Maybe out in the countryside where the lots are, say, 2 acres in size or bigger, you know, maybe that's more appropriate. I know in Chatsworth, that's the approach they've taken, for example, and in Meaford, where they allow for a second dwelling unit in a separate structure, but only out in the countryside and on lots that are 2 acres in size or larger. So I'm wrapping this up, folks, by saying a lot of this detail can be left in your zoning bylaw, but we probably should put some motherhood type statements in the official plan to deal with second dwellings, both types, the one that's in the house and the one that's in a second structure. So open it up now for some discussion on that.
Okay. Well, judging from the congestion that we're already concerned about with townhouses and snow removal and things like that, my opinion is that we should do something to not allow the secondary units in townhouses at least, and probably in semis as well. There are I know of at least one secondary dwelling that's separate in town, and it's above a garage at the back of the property, but that went through a whole process as well. So I agree. I think out of the urban area is probably better for the separate buildings. Anyone have any comments?
John.
Brian? And then Martin.
Thank you, John. If we're looking, Ron, for motherhood statements, I would suggest something along the lines of allow creative suggestions on how to accommodate second dwellings, how to encourage second dwellings that would be non-disruptive to the surrounding community, and all the things that you talked about there. I see in some municipalities they're allowing as you call it, a bunkie for a workspace. Now that a lot of people are working from home, they put the working person of the household out in that little office, so to speak. I don't see that's a lot different than having someone actually live in that bunkie out there. The issue about the parking is absolutely an issue, but I think if you dial out from the picture and look at a broader view, if we can have more employment lands and more employment opportunities in the urban area, i.e. Dundalk, then that reduces the need for every person in the household to have a vehicle. Perhaps they can walk to work, ride a bicycle, or carpool, whatever. It's a chicken and egg thing, I know. But if we're going to plan to accommodate all the cars, we're going at it the wrong way. I think we're doing it right the way we are now. We're encouraging density and forcing people to think, how do we do this without vehicles? There's some motherhood statements there for you to sort through. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Martin?
Yeah, I think with some of these secondary apartments coming into these places, those houses were not made for that. And so there could be a lot of building issues. Some of them might do a little bit more than just putting a door to lock up so nobody comes upstairs. There was one in Dundalk where the upper floor was rented out. It was only a certain amount of money, and it seemed cheap, but the basement was rented. So, there is that building code aspect to it to make them safe. They're not built for it. They are built as single dwellings. And as far as doing all these little bunkies. I read somewhere where Kitchener, they allow tiny homes in backyards. This is a city. I don't know how you could do that. So I'm leaning still more to having those things out in the rural areas instead of in the urban. But that was a good point from Brian. I must admit, I tipped my hat off to him when I heard it. The issue about all the cars, like 4 cars. I see that when I go to Orangeville, because there's still so many people driving to the city. There's 4 cars in the laneways, which are only made for 2. So if we can get stuff going to have work here, that would take away that problem. And yeah, but as far as this discussion, I would say keep them. I agree with John. Try and keep them outside, and make sure that the apartments that are going into these second dwellings, or the second dwellings going into these buildings, they are done properly. And that's another issue. So that's it.
Okay, Dave? You say some of the best. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I wasn't speaking. I was trying to hit the button. But anyway,
okay.
just I wouldn't. I'd like to comment. I wouldn't worry about the building construction side of the secondary suite. I mean, we've got sledgehammers and we've got chief building officials to make sure they're done right. The 2 biggest issues are parking and snow storage, especially for townhomes and so on for secondary suites. If we can put policy in place that the maximum parking for a townhouse is 2 cars, or the secondary suite doesn't have parking privileges, I don't know. I'm going to leave that to the planners to figure that out, and ensuring that there's adequate snow storage if there is going to be this parking made available, because these things are easy to talk about now, but it's when the rubber meets the road and they start moving in and all these things start happening. That's the problem. And the places for the vehicles causes a snow storage problem. So maybe we need to look at setting the homes back, townhomes further back on the property, so we have front yard storage for snow. I don't know, but I'll leave that for policy to establish those things.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Michael?
Yeah, I gotta tend to agree with you, is that congestion of the vehicles being parked. I mean, pretty much every house up in that new subdivision has at least 4 cars in the driveway, and that's not a camping trailer or other utility vehicles that people have on top of that. So, and in the wintertime here, if we ever get a storm like we had, 25 years ago, before global warming took effect, I mean, most of those houses, you wouldn't be able to find some of them up in there, because we'd have absolutely nowhere to go with the snow. We'd have to truck it all out of there. And as I said, those houses are cityfied houses as far as I'm concerned. There's no property around them. And these people, I mean, they're not going to get jobs. They need cars to get to the city, because we don't have rural transit. We don't have GO Train here to take you to Toronto. We don't have shopping here for if someone wants stuff. So they're all going to have vehicles. That vehicles is not going to go away. When you live in a small commuter town like Dundalk is, they're going to need transportation to get there. So if you think they're going to park their car and walk, they're not going to. So we need to make sure that we have parking. I was on the weekend, seniors I was talking to, they moved into a senior's home. Now they got no room to park. They're going to park here. Well, they're not really allowed to park over there. So what are they going to do in the wintertime? So we need to make sure that when we approve all these things, that parking is top priority in Dundalk right now, downtown or in these new subdivisions.
Okay. Anyone else like to make any comments? Oh, okay. Jim?
I want to get some information on the past part of the program. Do we have a count on the for and against on the severances?
Oh, on the count for keeping the, keeping things the same? Was that on the last one? Is that what you're saying?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the way I wrote it down, Brian, myself, Barb, and Martin all did stay the same. You talked about not having as much as the county, but less. And both Jason and Michael talked about 2.
It's 4-3.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments about this one? Does that give you, oh, Barbara?
Thank you. And just to clarify that this is the direction we're giving Ron at this time, still has to come back for final debate. Maybe something will miraculously present itself as a solution to any of these situations. With regard to secondary dwellings, I'm pretty sure that there's underground, pardon the pun, under basement apartments, underground secondary suites inside homes that are not necessarily been approved by the township, or that the building department may be aware of. That's going to happen because it's just the cost of creating a proper secondary suite and going through the process seems to be restrictive. That's what I've heard. Parking is already an issue, as everyone has stated. People are parking on the road or parking in our municipal lot from apartments on Main Street. They're renting them out to people with more than one vehicle, and they're just using the municipal lot. So, bylaw enforcement becomes a problem. Snow removal, are we going to start towing vehicles off the road because, in between November and April? The more we allow, the more that congestion is just going to continue to increase. It's already a problem, and we haven't even touch the surface of it. So I agree with everyone. Snow storage and parking is always going to be an issue, and we need to direct those secondary suites to where it can be manageable.
So does that give you a kind of enough direction, Ron?
Yeah, it certainly does. And yes, I've been taking notes on all of this. Certainly with this one, really what the province is saying to us is, guys, we really want you to have second dwelling units pretty much everywhere. And the county official plan is saying, yeah, so do we, but we'll leave it up to the local municipalities. So, I'll be very careful in how we word the policy here. It might not be an outright, absolutely not anywhere. In terms of, in the urban area, but certainly in single family dwellings, but I guess they have to get creative, I guess, if they want to allow for it in a brand new semi or townhouse. It gives me enough information. I know exactly what council is saying, and yeah, I think we're fine here. And absolutely, council will be seeing this document a few more times.
Okay, great. Jason?
I had a quick question. We're talking about all the parking in Dundalk and the new subdivisions. Then why are we planning and building these subdivisions so tight that there is no parking and no place for snow removal? I'm going to dovetail ahead to the next one, which is a hot topic for me a while ago, affordable housing. If someone wants to rent their basement out and make some money and add a dwelling for someone else, isn't that what we're looking for, affordable housing? So why are we putting these houses so close together where we can't park 3 or 4 vehicles in them? Then we're saying, well, we have no. I don't understand that. Just a question to the planners, I guess.
Yep, Clint's already got his hand up.
The short answer is because the developer isn't going to get any money for making it bigger so that the owner can then put an accessory apartment in it. So the developer, when he comes forward with his plan of subdivision, he's coming forward with it to meet the provisions of the zoning bylaw with respect to the minimum number of spots. So if he puts up a 2-bedroom house or a 3-bedroom house, it's required to have 2 spots, I believe it is, on their yard. That's it. And usually one of those is counted as the garage. Beyond that, they don't necessarily want to build that or plan for that, because that takes out of their pocket money for the next lot they want to build, if they have to make them bigger to allow for these accessory apartments. So if that's something we're going to do, the accessory apartment things has to be somehow included in the planning, to make them no longer accessory, but actually considered as part of the future expansion of this house, sort of thing, is how I look at it and why I see there's a problem.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we can we can go on to that affordable housing.
Okay, so yeah, as everyone knows, unless you haven't been breathing for the last several years, affordable housing is a problem, to put it bluntly. And whatever COVID has done to us in terms of making all of a sudden people wanting to move up here, I guess that's probably the driving factor. That's just put housing through the roof, the price of housing in the last 18 months. And we've all read how, you know, in Grey Bruce, I think the average house went from 404, average house sale went from 404,000 to over 600,000, I think, in about 18 months, which is ridiculous. So the county official plan, well, first of all, the provincial policy statement encourages affordable housing. The county official plan also encourages affordable housing and provides targets for new home construction in this regard. But when I say encourages and provides targets, it doesn't say thou shall require a developer to build X amount of units in the affordable range. Again, it's encouraging. The only way a municipality can really require a developer to build affordable housing, like a percentage, 30% or whatever, is to do something called inclusionary zoning practices. And that's a very, very complicated process. And that it requires, you may think, well, geez, how difficult is it? Well, you know, you just can't require the developer to sell a house for $300,000 and leave it at that. We got to make sure that that $300,000 or $320,000 house is sold in another 5 years as affordable, and then after that is affordable. It's just not the first guy to buy the house gets a deal of the century and then he or she makes off like a bandit. To my knowledge, there are no municipalities that do inclusionary zoning. It's a pain. Some people also wonder out loud if, you know, it's overly fair to the developer to have to build at a certain price. Like, does that mean that, you know, when that person living in that house goes to buy a car, do they also get a break from the car dealership? And when they buy groceries, do they get a break from the grocer because they're in the income bracket where they need all these breaks? My recommendation is that you encourage, you have strong policies in your official plan that encourage affordable housing, and that there's some things you can do to make sure that it's worthwhile, maybe for the developer to build affordable housing, but not to say thou shall have 30% in a new subdivision in the category of affordable housing. And this is something that we just need some direction from council on at this time.
Okay, I myself, I agree with your recommendation of handling it more through policy than and just have kind of the motherhood statements in the official plan. What's any other thoughts or questions? Okay, Dave.
So other than maybe Clint still being here, in 10 years, who's going to be pulling out the policy and saying, hey, you know, you sold this house for more than 10% above the purchase price? I mean, really, really difficult stuff to manage in my mind.
Yeah, and if I may, that's exactly my point. I've spoken with a number of people about this issue, including again the county planning department on several occasions, and I think everybody realizes it's somewhat of an administrative nightmare. That's twice now I've used that term. And it's just, and I think everybody's kind of waiting to see how other municipalities do it, but nobody seems to be interested in doing this. Even over in other parts like nearby here in Soggy Shores, where they have a massive housing shortage because of the impact that Bruce Power has on, unfortunately, the people that don't work at Bruce Power. Nobody else can afford a house over there. But they, you know, there they have policies again that encourage it, but they haven't gone so far as to actually come up with a requirement. It's just a massive undertaking.
Like just to, in response to you know, looking at this, I mean, I'm going to throw a really stupid idea, but the only way to do it would be to track the price of the house, that it be required that it follow the impact assessment on the property, and not greater than that, the sale price. Like, to me, I mean, I'm just throwing that out for discussion as a way to at least establish a price. To me, is let the market bear what it is, and really create housing that sets is the price is set based on market demand. And I'm thinking along the lines of focusing on tiny home developments and taking some of these lots of record that are in these 100-acre developments that were created in the 60s as lots that could be, you know, 4 or 5 tiny homes put on, and kind of condominiumize the development with one well and one septic system shared. The other one I'll throw out there is promoting what I'm going to call housing parks. I don't like the word trailer parks, but housing parks that, you know, the land is provided at a price and servicing, and that they can put a trailer, or they can put a modular home or something like that on the cement base that's provided, and make it affordable in that maybe 100 or two less than $200,000 development type thing. But I think those are the type of policies that we may want to consider. And just so Ron knows, we're starting in September with a attainable, affordable housing committee that is going to look at some of these things. So we may have you, you know, talk at that committee or be involved a wee bit, where it's going to fit with the official plan review.
Yep. Yeah, agreed. Martin.
Yeah, the inclusionary zoning, it you know, is a complicated matter. Like, how can you possibly look after that? If I went into a home and I did some makeovers to make it my own home, I wouldn't be getting the money back from that, from that investment, because it would have to stay at that same price. So this inclusionary zoning, it's kind of a hard thing to do. And to tell a builder that he has to have this percentage, well, he can. I'm pretty sure a builder would want to say that, okay, well, I'm doing another plan where the houses will be at a certain price. You're going to get these areas where there's going to be really nice houses, then smaller houses, and it's not going to build a community. You know, they're going to have to be kept separated in some way, just to make that palatable for the builder himself. So anyway, the inclusionary zoning, I'm not into that at all. But yeah. But the idea of having housing that is economical for the people moving in, like Dave said, there's no stigmatism to having your own home. And I've actually worked in trailer parks, mobile homes. The people there are everyday people. They look after their property just as anybody else, and they're quite comfy in where they are. So that's one of the things that we do have to look at. And to say to a builder that 30% has to be this subdivision, has to be this, well, forget about that. Make another subdivision where it is all economical homes to begin with. So there's lots of ways to go around it. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Does anyone disagree with that we stay out of the mandating the zoning and that type of stuff, but look at through different policies to try and get to the affordable?
Yep.
Okay, so that's what we'll do with that, and then now we can move on to the minimum size dwellings, I guess is next.
Certainly. So again, this is another topic that ends up in your zoning bylaw, like, I mean, in terms of the specifics. But we should in our new housing policies and the new official plan, you know, give it some direction. Right now in your zoning bylaw, and your zoning bylaw is like almost every other zoning bylaw in Grey County, Bruce County, and probably most of Ontario, where you've established a minimum floor area for a single family dwelling, for example, of about 1,100 square feet. It varies depending on whether or not there's a basement, but it's about 1,000 to 1,100 square feet. And this doesn't work anymore. I mean, that I don't really know how we came up with that number. It's kind of funny though that from municipality to municipality to municipality, it's the same number. So somebody thought it was a good idea, and at the time it likely was. But it's an arbitrary number. I mean, someone just said, well, let's how big of a house do we want that's, you know, not too small? Well, 1,100, and that's what they've come up with. So what we're finding, folks, is the municipalities now are doing one of two things. They're either reducing that number, and one number that floats around is about 600 square feet, or they've taken a pen, proverbially speaking, and just they've eliminated that number. They just said, well, we'll let the Ontario Building Code dictate what the size of the dwelling would be, and it's my understanding it's about 300 square feet if you follow the building code. And you know, the term tiny homes has already been used so far. That's kind of a very generic term. I mean, I actually Googled it last week to see if there was a term, a definition of it, you know, and you know, it could vary in size from, I don't know, pick a number, 60 square feet to something considerably larger. So I think my suggestion is we don't talk about tiny homes, but we do come up with a building floor area requirement that we should be applying. And again, it's going to be found in the zoning bylaw, but I think we need to provide some general direction in the official plan for that as well. So just looking for comments on that. Thanks.
Okay, anyone with comments on that? For myself, okay, Jason and then Barbara.
So I guess going back to the last two subjects, to the planners again, why are we not telling in the new subdivision in Dundalk, why are we not telling the developers to build these small houses? And I think we know the answer, I think, because they don't want it because there's no money. It's just a vicious circle. So you can't, I don't think you're never going to be able to mandate them to build small houses, and which was what we need for affordable housing, is it not? So it's just a big circle. It all comes down to the money. Why are we not telling them then, okay, if we're putting in 400 houses here, you're going to build that many? It's like we discussion last time. It's not going to happen. So I just don't understand where we're going with it. I just don't understand it. If we're not going to mandate it, then how are you going to get around it?
If I may, Mr. Chair. So yeah, these are minimum standards, but I still get your point. I guess the reason why I'm talking about this is, and there's a lot of inquiries for people not wanting to build a 1,100 square foot house. I can't speak for your building official in Southgate, nor can I speak for Clint, but I can speak for Chatsworth and West Grey, where there's a lot of people that are saying we'd like to build a house that's 700, 800 square feet, and we make them go through a minor variance process to do that. We're for what it's worth, they're changing that in Chatsworth when they pass a new zoning bylaw, but there's a lot of people just saying, for people that do want to build a smaller home, they're not allowed to do so, and that's why we're having this discussion. It's not to mandate this on anybody, but rather give them the option if they want to go with something smaller. Myself, you know, if the lot next door to me in Owen Sound here was vacant, you know, I prefer to see my neighbor build a house that's of similar size and not a 310 square foot house. I don't know if that would ever happen. Maybe it would, I don't know. Like, I mean, so there can be somewhat of I don't know if land use compatibility issue is the right term, but certainly might be some people that are concerned at the very least that they'd like their neighbor to build something similar to what they have.
Okay, thank you. Barb? You're muted.
$5. The checkerboard lots that Dave had mentioned that were created in the, you know, the 60s and 70s that, you know, are really not buildable for access. And, you know, the housing part, you know, where you have land lease, and I see there being merit in reducing the size of the home requirement. Like we're saying, you cannot build a home for less than 1,100 square meters at the present time. Well, on these smaller lots or tiny home developments or land lease where, you know, they could get away with a 750 square foot lot fabric. And that is where the individual is building. We're not talking about the houses that are in, you know, well, maybe we are, but right at the moment, the developers have, you know, a type of house that they build that they find marketable, and, you know, that's separate. But if we're looking at, you know, allowing there to be the option for someone to build a smaller home to suit their needs, whether that's a granny flat or whatever, I think we need to explore that. I don't think that we need to eliminate it entirely to allow for 300 square feet. I think Grey Highlands did this. Does anybody know what that, they reduced, or they went and made their minimum square footage less. I want to say it's 600, but I would probably be wrong. Does anybody know? No.
I don't think so.
But as Ron said, West Grey and Chatsworth are looking at this as well. I could see some merit to not requiring, you know, 1,100 square feet, but I wouldn't be prepared to eliminate the minimum to go to whatever the base is on the Ontario Building Code. I think that's.
Okay.
Go ahead. Clinton's got his hand up.
Yep.
Maybe you've got an answer.
Go ahead, Clint.
Just a couple comments. One is, this is a way to make housing more affordable. Certainly, if someone may have enough money to buy a lot, but then they don't have enough money to buy or build the house that they want, or rather that the zoning bylaw requires them to build. But if they could build something smaller, A, it's more efficient from a climate change and energy efficiency point of view, and B, it's more affordable to them to do that. So I would certainly, in recommending a policy, would be to consider reducing it. The other thing I would suggest is that a lot of times this isn't going to be in an urban area. This is going to be out actually in a rural area more so than anything. The urban area, most of the lots are already developed and purchased, or they're being developed by developers where they have a preset build that they want to build for their customer and are going to sell that. So this is more out in the rural area than it is in an urban setting per se. By saying that though, that would include rural settlement areas. So you may end up with some tiny homes in, I don't know, Cedarville or Drumore or Swinton Park or somewhere like that.
Yeah, and I think we should keep in mind here that what we're looking for is should the official plan have a general policy, and we can handle specifics during in the zoning bylaws. So, Brian?
Thank you, John. I am quite prepared to support, going down to what the Ontario Building Code allows as a general statement across the township. And then if the zoning bylaw wants to adjust that up or down, well, I guess you can't go any lower, but if they want to adjust that up, that would be fine too. But Ron made a comment there regarding, in Owen Sound, if there was an empty lot beside him and somebody put up a tiny home of 310 square feet, that could create a land use conflict. And I'm wondering how so? And I don't see how that would create a land use conflict.
Yeah, I think, Brian, what I said was it wouldn't necessarily be a land use conflict, but it would be not more of a, not an ideal situation where.
Why?
And again, though, I think say that as a planner, I would say take my planner cap off and say, is the homeowner of 265 Beatty Street, I prefer the guy next door build something that's similar size. So
But why? But why? I don't understand why. Like, what difference does it make to you what the neighbor builds as long as it's well kept or maintained?
Sure. Yeah. You're probably right on that, Brian.
I mean, if the guy's a gardener, you might get a lot of tomatoes out of his front yard. You never know.
I think as a planner, he would, in the area, you would say that the house is, your house is going to be worth less now because the house beside you is worth less. So now yours is going to go down. I think that's, if you look at the picture, that's the way people would think.
Yeah, I didn't want to say that. That's what I was thinking. But, as planners, we try not to talk about a property and depreciating in value as a reason for, good or bad use planning. But I think, you guys on this topic have given me, like, I don't want to cut this off, but I mean, again, we're just looking for some general comments. And I think we've got enough here to come up with a policy that talks about the zoning bylaw given consideration to first of all, revisiting their current zoning provisions, and then secondly, just stating in there may be instances where even a further reduced on a site-by-site basis, and I'm thinking, because it keeps coming up, those checkerboard lots, maybe something a little bit smaller would be given special consideration. But again, this would just be general policy, and we'd let the zoning bylaw deal with that.
Okay. Martin?
Yeah, and the point of this is it's a minimum floor area of at least 1130 square feet. That's the basic building footprint. That doesn't take into consideration there might be a loft which is 600 square feet of living space, or they have a basement plus a mechanical room which gives them 500 square feet of living space. It's just the basic house footprint. So if we have, you obviously couldn't do it 300 square feet. There'd be too much wall if you wanted a loft. It'd have to go with code. But if we had a house of the basic footprint being half of the 13, 560, it's room to move, and they can move up as well. they can still get a lot more living space if there's a lot line, a loft available, or whatever design they do. So there's a lot of movement in this figure, but I do agree it should be brought down. And you can live in a 600 square foot house. So
Just
I
to
would
be
say bring it down.
Yeah. Just
I
to
would
be
say
clear,
I'd be okay with bringing it down. So
that provision, though, it's the floor area. It's not the footprint of the building, just to be clear.
oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But it doesn't take into, there's a long-winded explanation on that one, but it doesn't take into consideration cellars, but it takes into consideration, I think, basements. Does it a loft? I think it would. But anyways, but yeah, it's not intended to be just the footprint.
Okay.
Okay, I misunderstood.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Barbara, and then let's move on to the next one to get things in.
Two things. I did Google, I did look up the Grey Highlands bylaw amendment where they removed the floor area of not less than 55 square meters. They removed the minimum gross floor area. So it looks like they don't have a minimum, but I think it would be worthwhile for us to understand how that's going. How other municipalities, what their experience has been since removing that, and hearing from our building department, I think the Fisher's on the line, as to, their opinion on minimum size. I am supportive of reducing it. I'm not sure that I am supportive of taking it entirely away, whereby whatever the minimum building code allows, but I think that's another discussion, as it unfolds and we get more information. And when we're finished this section, Mayor Woodbury, maybe we should have a motion to go past one, the 3-hour limit.
Yep. We're running through this, and yes, I've got it marked down here that we'll do that. And I think what we're looking at here isn't the exact specifics of what we want to do for the numbers. It's more the idea of, do we want the motherhood statement in the official plan and then handle it in the zoning? Is that not correct, Dave or Ron?
That is correct.
Okay, so you've got enough information on this right now, and then we can have a longer discussion on this as we go.
Yes. The next is short. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. The short term.
Yeah, and we're almost done. The next issue is short-term accommodation. I don't know how much of an issue this is in your municipality. I know some municipalities don't do anything. For example, Chatsworth and West Grade don't have a bylaw dealing with the STAs. And then I know Blue Mountains does. And if you read good timing, if you read the Old Sound Sun-Times, I think Friday or Saturday, you would have learned that Northern Bruce Peninsula, where they have a lot of SDAs, the council's in the process of adopting a bylaw, and so they can license and regulate these things. I did speak with an employee, actually, it doesn't matter who he is, from Northern Bruce Peninsula about this matter. Did state that it's yeah, they can make money off it, but it's a lot of work for staff. And then of course you've got to have a working committee that deals with disputes. And his comment was, I guess if you have a whole lot of cottages and overnight accommodations for rent, it might be worthwhile. But unless it's a problem, his suggestion was don't do anything about it. And again, in the official plan, we don't need to contain any specific policies, but you might want to include a clause in there that council directs staff or themselves in the future to come up with a bylaw for short-term accommodation. And yeah, so appreciate council's thoughts on this.
Okay. Any thoughts? I know for myself that I don't know of too many, but we do have a couple that are, or at least one that is a real problem. So, Barbara.
That was what I was going to mention, Mayor Woodbury. We do have a number of neighbor disputes, I suppose, from people doing Airbnbs where you can rent somebody's house in the country and people come from all over thinking, hey, we're in the country, we can whoop it up. That's farmland as well. So I think we do need to address the matter about short-term accommodation. I understand that it takes housing off the market for permanent housing, and it can create additional conflicts. So I agree. In the official plan, perhaps we don't need to state it, but we do need to address it with a bylaw that prohibits it, restricts it, prohibits it. That's another discussion. Thank you.
Okay. Ron?
Yeah, okay, so on that note, I should just indicate maybe what other municipalities have done. So in Blue Mountains, for example, they have chosen areas where it's simply not allowed, okay? In northern Bruce Peninsula, and I believe now they're turning to South Bruce Peninsula as well, there's no areas where it's not allowed. They simply regulate it, and then they have a 3-strike approach where if you tick off your neighbors 3 times and your neighbor is found to be correct, and you were doing something, or your people that were renting or were making simply too much noise or being too much of a pain, then after 3 strikes you're done. But so I guess that's a good comment, because the question is, if you do regulate it, are you actually saying no, we're going to prohibit it in some areas, or are you going to say, well, we'll allow for it, but again, we're going to regulate it. You need a license, you're going to pay a 4% fee tax, and we'll have a committee, and there'll be a 3-strike approach, 3-strike and you're out approach. So there's two different ways to handle that, I guess.
Okay, Michael, then Barbara.
Now, I can see that's something that we need to have in there. Short-term workforce for us at the farm. During the summer we need more people than we need in the wintertime, so we need to have accommodations for those people as we provide it. So I can see that this is something that we need to have in there, and we definitely need a policy in there to make sure that we're getting revenue for it, but yet that they understand that it's short term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. Barb?
Thank you. And I understand where Michael's coming from, but I think isn't farm worker accommodation covered under another act, that it's not governed by short-term accommodation? I mean, I don't know that we would want to start requiring farm worker accommodations to be, additionally taxed when it's hard enough to get farm workers to begin with. Clinton's got his hand up on that one. I think enforcement on Airbnbs or short-term accommodation where people are renting out their houses for someone who wants to come up and they then bring up 40 people. Enforcement is a nightmare. Just ask our chief building official. And noise is subjective, and you can run into, oh, well, there's a 3-strike. I'm going to be pissed off 3 times. I'm going to lodge 3 complaints and I'll get it shut down. So I think that it'll be difficult. We either allow them or we don't. And Clinton, if you could speak to the farm workers accommodations, I don't know if it's an act or if it's just an allowed zoning amendment or consent, something like a granny suite.
Okay, Clinton?
Through the chair, it is in our zoning bylaw that temporary farm help accommodation is permitted in the agricultural zones, A1 and A2. So that is permitted at the present time, but it's for just that temporary farm help accommodation. So you need someone to pick apples, they're there to pick apples, that sort of thing. It's not for renting out for short periods of time for Airbnbs and that sort of thing.
Thanks, Clinton. I thought so.
Okay, any other comments on this? Should there be something in the official plan about the short-term accommodations? And then we can handle it through zoning bylaws or whatever. Okay, not seeing any others. I think that the idea is that yes, we should have something there, at least providing direction, and then we can handle it separate. Go ahead.
Fair enough.
Okay, Ron?
Yeah,
Okay.
works for me.
Yep.
Yeah.
The next policy deals with
Good for me.
the growing of, or not growing, but the production of cannabis or marijuana. The growing of cannabis, of course, is now it's you know, a recognized use. It's just another agricultural use, and hopefully I don't offend anybody by stating that. But it's the uses that are associated with it, which is the production side of it that needs to be looked at. These facilities usually quite often grow it on a property, and then on the same property they have a lab, and then an area where it's processed, dried, shipped. Usually it's shipped by courier for what that's worth. And that kind of stuff goes beyond, you know, in the agricultural use. So the county official plan has some general policies that they say that this type of facility should be treated as an on-farm diversified use, and we talked about that earlier, and that local municipalities can include criteria in their own official plans and zoning bylaws for establishing this type of operation. So what I can tell you, folks, is that some municipalities in Grey County have identified this processing component as an industrial use, and therefore they allow it on land zoned industrial. And I'll say that's what West Grey does, be that good, bad, or indifferent. I'll also tell you that West Grey doesn't have such a use. Now that can though be a problem if you treat it as an industrial use, because if it's allowed in an industrial zone, usually your industrial zones are found in the urban areas, and I'm quite aware of what's going on in Owen Sound here, because they changed their zoning bylaw just last year to deal with this. Not only when you fire up cannabis, I'm kind of being cheeky here, and smoke it, does it create a smell, but it also creates a strong odor when you start processing it. Like, so when you're drying it and even harvesting, I guess, it creates an odor. So some municipalities have said, okay, we're going to put a 150-meter buffer. So you can't, if there's a house or a school nearby, for odor reasons, you can't create such a use within 150 meters. Again, all due to odor issues. People would argue that that's what exhaust fans are for, and it would eliminate odors. And then, of course, the same use can also be, again, like the county said, permitted in the countryside. So direction I'm looking for from council today is, do we want to allow it in an urban area where it does run the risk of becoming a nuisance for odor purposes? So we stay away, and if we do that, or if we stay away from the urban areas, then we're obviously staying away from the populated areas, and hopefully smaller complaints or no complaints. And therefore, if you don't allow it in the urban area, you allow it out in the countryside and rural and agricultural designations as an on-farm diversified use, as suggested by the county. So the question is, do we allow it in the countryside, in the urban area, or one or the other? And that's it.
Okay, Martin?
Yeah, thanks, John. I drive by a couple of these facilities every day, and I don't see, and I think Dave's mentioned this before, how an agricultural product needs security fencing and barbed wire and all this stuff. It's just a fact that since it's became legalized, we have a supply chain now, and I think it should be strictly, from my personal view, it should be strictly in the countryside. That way, you don't have noise problems. Let them have all their security gates and their CTV cameras and what have you. And as I said, it's a supply chain issue now. You go away anywhere, how many cannabis shops are opening up in empty retail stores? There's got to be 2 or 3. There's got to be 2 in Shelburne, and Owen Sound is a number. So that's my point. It's a supply and chain thing. If you have a butcher downtown, you don't want the abattoir in the industrial section. It's going to be away in a site away from the general public. So I would think it's best suited in the country setting, and whatever agricultural setting you want to give it, or zoning number. But I don't think it should be something near a town. Keep it outside in the country. As I said, you won't have issues with odor and people complaining. The owners might have issues with people trying to get in, hence that's why they have the security. But I think it should be best suited only in the countryside.
Okay, anyone else? Barbara?
Thank you. So I can disagree that odor isn't an issue with cannabis producing facilities in the rural countryside, because odor travels and it has a definite odor that is constant. I mean, you live in the countryside, you know when they're spreading manure, and you know it's going to be 24, 48 hours. And but you know, the cannabis facilities is constant. And at attending the Association of Municipalities of Ontario last week, there was a cannabis production facility session, and it, just looking at it here, it was cannabis growing in municipalities, even medical. If you have a medical prescription, you can have upwards of 500 plants. That's separate from the 4 plants per household for recreational use. And that in itself is creating a conflict with neighbors. The town of Pelham is, you know, obviously in, you know, fighting appeals that producers are filing with the Superior Court and, you know, Farm Practices Board. Defending the municipal position has been costly because they tried to restrain based on odor and lighting. I mean, having these facilities lit up, the greenhouses lit up, has created conflicts as well. And I just wanted to mention that the University of Guelph is hoping to have a good neighbor policy established or a toolkit for municipalities, but that's not until 2022. So things to watch for. Noise is one thing, but odor and lighting are the 2 most common nuisance factors or complaint factors with regard to cannabis growing facilities. I definitely would not support them near the urban centers. It should be in the agricultural area, but to say that where odor and lighting doesn't matter, I would disagree.
Okay, Ron?
Yeah, so very good comments. One thing I probably should have added, and I just thought of this now, is that we, of course, through this policy direction the council is going to give us, but I still think a use like this would require a zoning bylaw amendment. So all of this would be taken into so the official plan would make that clear that it could be considered in the countryside zonings, if you will, but will require an amendment to the official plan, and that therefore odor, noise, lighting, traffic issues like that can be taken into consideration. And of course, proximity of houses and other sensitive land uses will also be taken into consideration.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. Clinton?
Just sort of further to that, to add some criteria as to taken into consideration, maybe if we had some criteria in the OP, what do you guys feel about the minimum of 150 meters from a sensitive receptor, basically from a neighbor's house or a school? Is if you're talking out in the countryside, that's what you're looking at.
Yeah.
So how does council feel about that?
I think that's a good idea. Yeah, I'm seeing some heads nod, so I think that that should be in there too. Okay, does that give you
It does.
direction on that? Okay. Just before we move on to the next one, I'd like to need a mover and seconder to go past 1 o'clock. Barb and Martin, any discussion? Okay, anyone opposed? Okay, that's carried. Barb, you had something?
Just a quick question, because I'm not very good with distance, Clinton. 150 meters. How would that compare to, say, the Eco Park to the center of Dundalk or to the school? What's the distance between the Proton School and the Eco Park?
If you give me 1 second, I can give you a somewhat exact, but
somebody knows.
It's probably 150 meters is probably less than what that distance is.
Right.
To be honest.
And we already have issues, so I'm just using it as a comparator, where complaints with regard to odor, escaping odors from the Eco Park, regardless of what the odor is, and that's more than 150 meters. You know, it's the countryside, I get it, and certainly is 150 meters sufficient? What is the MDS setback from a nutrient barn to a house, to another?
There isn't a specific setback because it's based on intensity. So if you had five cows versus 100 cows, it changes.
Right. I'm looking at it from as a comparator. Is 150 meters sufficient?
Well, I think
because
one
we
of the
do have
things,
rural schools. We have rural schools as well.
yeah, I think the idea at this point, being the first kick at the can, is do we want that type of a distance thing in there? And we can look at some of that stuff, and if we want to change that number up next time we meet, we can do that and see. Because I think
I'm just providing my comment, Mayor.
yeah, I understand that, and I appreciate it. I just don't know if we can decide sitting here right now what the right distance would be. I think that we want one in is the thing.
Exactly. Thank you.
Yeah, Martin.
Yeah, and I think that's the question. The question here, like, would we want some kind of distance put in? Clinton just mentioned how many units of pigs or sheep or cows you have. We could do that with this. How many plots are you going to grow of this? You could do it by an acreage or the size of your place of where you're growing it. It could be dependent on that too. So there's all kinds of ways to look at it, but the fact that there should be some kind of distance in there, yeah, for sure, obviously.
Okay. So that gives you some information on that, Ron, and we can move on to the next.
Yes, it does. Thanks. One thing I'll add, though, is in addition to a zoning bylaw amendment and having to conform with this new official plan, these types of operations still require a permit and a license, two different things from Health Canada. Just so you understand, you're not alone in terms of regulating this. There are, at least there were some very, very tight regulations on cannabis operations. Source water protection. So since I've written this one paragraph, I've realized, thanks to Clint, that the one official plan amendment that you've recently adopted is before the county has already come up with policies for the source to protect the municipal well around Dundalk. So I don't need to turn to you to ask you if you need more restrictive policies, because you've already adopted an official plan amendment that has, or not more restrictive, but more accurate policies, I guess, or more specific policies. So I will simply carry those forward into the new official plan. So there's no action or no discussion required on that particular topic. Moving along to climate change, the new official plan will include some policies on climate change. I don't think we're going to solve all the problems of the world with regard to climate change, but you can certainly include policies that show that we care, and hopefully little by little this will help. There are policies brand new in the county official plan, and I'm assuming that what we come up with would be very similar to those. And I don't know if council has any questions about that.
Okay.
Ron, how do you feel about the county's adopting this climate change action plan strategy? How would you feel? And I'm not saying that council will adopt it, but what staff will be doing is likely bringing that to adopt it as a lower tier municipality supporting that. But would we just refer to those kind of strategies in that plan, or that plan as our reference document?
For sure, like I think at the very least we want to include our comment that, you know, first of all, let's see what the county put in their official plan, and I did look at it, and I'll look at it again. Certainly put in our new official plan also that we support climate change endeavors, you know, of the county, and that's, yeah. And if we want to, it'd be nice to know what was in there, but before we say we 100% support it, but I'm assuming we will. So yeah, I think we certainly want to make reference to that document, and yeah, maybe go so far, Dave, as to say, yeah, we when it comes out that's going to be you know, one of our policies in Southgate.
Okay, thank you. Okay, not saying anything further on that one either. And folks, that's it. So right now, the county, the next steps, the county again is they've already, since I wrote this, Carolyn Bailey at the county is working on the new schedules. She really has to wait before she gets too far to get the hazard land mapping from the other conservation authority, Grand River. And then she can start coming up with her mapping, and I'll give her some direction in terms, I've already given her direction. We had a good long chat the other day about what will likely be required. And now that I know what approach we're taking with some of those other appendices, I can enlighten her. The writing of the official plan text will now begin. I already kind of started that. Certainly take into account council's comments on the issue. And then, yeah, once we have the first draft, we'll have to have we'll give it to council, give you lots of time to go over it, and then once you're generally satisfied with it, then we start circulating it to the agencies and have our first open house with members of the public. So we're making progress. Great. Yep, sounds good. Okay, so we have the motion moved by Michael and Barb that we were just a second. Yeah, that we receive the official plan review presentation as information, and that we recommend that council receive it as information. Any further discussion on that? Anyone opposed? Okay, that is carried. Thank you. So thank you, Ron. That's, yeah, a lot of stuff. And I can say that quite confidently, dealing with Randy and Scott at the county and Clint in our as our staff, you're good quality planners and people that just trying to do the best thing. So it's really good. So thank you, Ron. Let's just, yep, go ahead. So let's just motion by Martin and Jim that we resolve back to council. Any further discussion on that? Okay, seeing none, that is carried. And then we have a motion from Jason and seconded by Barb that council received the official plan review presentation as information. Any discussion on that? Dave?
Just before we leave, Ron, the next time we meet, would you anticipate the same amount of time being required to discuss or more or less?
Yeah, that's, I know, and I apologize for the fact that we did this for 3 hours, but there's no other way to do this, right? And this is very important. Dave, to answer your question, I don't know. I would assume, you know, like what'll happen is I guess there'll be some highlights that I'll ask for a brief discussion on, but it might be more of the talking might be done at your end, council's end, where you're asking me questions about specific stuff. So yeah, I would say we better not leave give us less than 3 hours next time. I mean, I think we did a great job. I don't have to tell anybody how to run a meeting, and this was very productive. I like the idea that we did the show of hands, so to speak, because you know, other councils we may have been discussing this for another 14 hours. So, but even having said that, yeah, probably give us a good 3 hours next time.
And so don't apologize. This is likely one of the most important things this term of council is likely going to deal with. We need to get this official plan right and be either more accommodating or more difficult, but we need to get it right. And thanks for your time.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think next time, yeah, we'll just have a special meeting for this and carry on. So yeah, thanks again, Ron.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yep. So we've got just a couple of minutes after 1. We haven't had a break, and we have a bunch of the other stuff. I don't want to take a long break. Does 15 minutes satisfy everybody for right now, and then we'll get right at everything else? Dave, does that work?
Maybe before you leave, sorry, I interrupted before you had the vote on receiving Ron's report, so you better finish that before we adjourn, maybe.
Okay. Yeah, so that was moved by Jason, second by Barb, that council receives the report presentation. Is anyone opposed to that? Okay, so that's carried as well. So 20 after 1, and we'll get right back at everything. Okay, so we'll recess and don't be fall off the slide or anything. Yep, Barb, did you want something?
Yeah, could staff give us an indication of how much more time they perceive the additional items to this special meeting of council taking? I do have another commitment this afternoon, and but I mean, I am somewhat flexible. And are there any items that have been added to this special meeting of council that could be on our meeting next week? Like, don't we have a council meeting next week, September 1st?
Yep.
How about staff caucus on that, and we'll get back to you when we get back in
When we
session.
reconvene? Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Okay, well, I've got 120 and I can see quorum. Lots of people. So how did we make out, Dave, on with what we have? Are we just going to take a run at what we have, or another good comment on mute?
Sorry about this. We believe we can get through this agenda in 45 minutes or if not less. There's not that many reports on here and there's no consent, so let's get at it.
Okay, good. Next up, we do have Kayla's reports, 8.1.1, moved by Martin, seconded by Michael, and that's the ISIP COVID funding agreement. There's Kayla. Hi, turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I don't really have a whole lot of comments on this. This is just another piece of the puzzle and the renovations that we've been working on.
Okay, any questions or comments? Okay, seeing, yep, Jason, go ahead.
I was just wondering, like, I think we brought it up before, the cost was, I think I'm on the right one here, between 200 and 250,000. Just seems like a big, quite a gap there, is it? Or
Do you want to take that, Kayla, or do you want me to?
I'll let you take that one.
Okay, so there are some other parts to the project. We have taken on the outside accessibility, so we'll be doing some parking lot paving to pave for parking in front and on the side, and a bit of paving in front of the works garage. That's likely going to come in around $40,000. And then Lindsay has a budget over and above the contracted price for sound system and recording system and virtual technology for council meetings.
Okay. Does that answer everything for you, Jason?
yeah, just a follow up. Maybe it says here, but I didn't see. When are we hoping to have it done by, Dave?
The end of the year, December 31st. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, is anyone opposed to this motion? That is carried. And next we have the bylaw for that agreement, moved by Jason, seconded by Jim. Any discussion on the bylaw? Okay, Lindsay, I'll turn the vote over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Woodbury. So recorded votes on bylaw 2021-121. Mayor Woodbury,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Milne,
Yay.
Councillor Dobreen,
In favor?
Councillor Rice,
Yes.
Councillor Shearson,
Yes.
Councillor Frew,
Yes.
Councillor Shipston.
Yes.
By a vote of 7-0, that is carried.
Okay, thank you. And thanks for those, Kayla. Next, we move on to Dave's reports, 8.2.1, moved by Brian, seconded by Michael, and that's the AMO conference report. Did you want to say anything about that, Dave?
Just that the conference was, I think, better than the Roma conference. It had more content, was fairly informative. Still, missing some things that definitely you would get with the live sessions. I think an interesting presentation was definitely the Ontario Health Team concurrent session. It was evident from that session that we need to be more involved in the Ontario Health Team process. So I'm going to be talking to Kim at the county, the CEO, and there should be some representation from municipalities from the county at least to represent our interests. But there was a person from Frontenac Lennox Addington that posts 6 very interesting comments, and some of those comments I have attached and are questions that I'll leave for your consideration. There was also another good session on the police service boards and some issues there. So anyway, I'll leave it for if there's any other questions beyond that.
Okay, Brian, you had something?
I was just going to say the Interior Health Team thing. There was some very valid questions raised, and Dave has posted 6 of them here. Actually, very few of the Interior Health teams that are in various stages of formation, very few of them have dealt with governance to this point, and that's where municipal representatives will be important, I think. The Guelph Wellington Health team is one of the few that has started down the path of governance, but the vast majority of them are dealing strictly with operational and how the mechanics of this thing's going to work. And yeah, there's a lot of concern, I think, from elected officials on where's the accountability going to lie with this monster that's being created. And the fear of every Ontario Health team is, are we just going to end up with a mini LHIN? The local health integration, are we just going to create another one of those? So everybody's very concerned about creating just more layers of bureaucracy, but not many of the health teams have actually started those discussions on how is the governance going to look. But good questions raised, and I think we need to keep it on our radar. Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah. The AMO conference, I agree. I found it better than Roma. One thing I hope that is a hang-on thing after we can start going to conferences in person again is I really do enjoy the idea of them taping and you having a week afterwards to look at some of the other things. That way you don't have to miss any of the concurrent sessions at all. If there's 2, because it always happens, there's 2 that you want to see at the same time. And so I think I would hope that carries on afterwards. But yeah, you miss a lot not being there in person. Any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, is everybody in favor of receiving that information? I guess I'm saying no. I'm saying, is anyone opposed?
Dave has his hand up.
Who does?
Dave had his hand up before you go.
Yep.
Yes, I did miss a couple things that I'd be remiss in not touching on. One was we had a really good delegation with Kinga Sermon, and she's the Minister of Infrastructure, about the issues related to internet service providers and the cost of connecting to the big 3. We had a really good discussion there, and I think she heard our messages. And how internet is going to be auctioned off in the future was good. One session that may have got missed by some, but the Woodland Culture Center, there was a kind of a film tour, and that was about a residential school facility around London. And there was some pretty revealing and eye-opening information come out of that. So if you get a chance to see that in the future, that's a film that they do provide online, I believe. That's
yeah.
it, John.
Okay. Yeah, that was something, that film. The other delegations with the county as well went very well. And I found a different attitude this year dealing with the various ministers and PAs. They seemed very aware of the issues beforehand, and were coming up with more substantial things to kind of step forward with and want to move forward. And I just found more confidence in all of them this time than there had been in the past. You know, you hate going to delegations where you get a whole lot of that double talk, and we didn't seem to get that at any of them, I don't think. Okay, so everyone in favor of receiving that, or everyone, no, okay, I should have had a longer lunch. Anyone opposed to receiving that for information? Okay, that's carried. And next we move on to the correspondence for vaccination policy updates, moved by Martin, seconded by Barbara. Do you want to add anything to that, Dave?
We just put that in the agenda because we thought it was very current and should be out there for information for council members and the public, rather than wait even another week on that one.
Yeah, agreed. Any discussion on this? Okay, is anyone opposed to receiving this? And that is carried. Next is the Grey County Southgate Land Transfer Agreement, and that is moved by Michael, seconded by Jason. That's pretty straightforward, I think. Did you want to add anything to that, Dave?
Just that I like they've put in the agreement, they've referred to it as a donation, so minimal cost.
Yes. Yeah. Any questions or comments? I just like seeing this going forward. That's a big thing. Okay, is anyone, oh, Brian, go ahead.
Just real quick, Dave, how far away are we from seeing a more final site plan, so to speak? I know it's been through all the bylaw and through this whole report, it's all draft, subject to change. When are we going to see more of a final?
I would say that site plan is likely final, subject to the Ministry of Health putting their fingers on it.
Oh,
so that's,
man, really?
And that's you know, I'm never going to say never because but this is final because Al's working on 7-step process. He's at step 3, maybe 4 now, and he has to work through all this. So I'll reserve comment that, you know, the Ministry of Health may need to put their little stamp of approval, but I would think it unlikely in relation to the parking lot area.
We'll give them a parking spot. Would they be happy with that? I don't know.
Yeah, we could even put a sign.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Okay. Is anyone opposed to this motion? That is carried. Next, moved by Jim, seconded by Michael. And that's the bylaw to go with that. Any comments or questions? Okay, seeing none. Lindsay, I'll turn that over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Woodbury. Recorded vote called for bylaw 2021-118 for the land transfer with Grey County. Councillor Shipston?
Yes.
Mayor Woodbury?
Yes.
Councillor Rice?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Milne?
Yay.
Councillor Frew?
Yes.
Councillor Dobreen?
In favor?
Councillor Shearson?
Yes.
By a vote of 7-0, that's carried.
Okay, next we have CAO report 2021-063. That's the communications tower and antenna. Moved by Jason, seconded by Jim. Would you like to comment on that, Dave?
The only thing, I think the report is fairly thorough in what, you know, the concerns and the support for this policy from ISPs. I think the one unique thing about this is one ISP that was concerned got Industry Canada involved. Industry Canada asked us for a copy of it, and we asked them for a review of the document, and they've reviewed it against the CPC 2-0-03 policy guideline document they have. And we've made the changes in our policy guideline to match their document. So we feel pretty comfortable that this policy is good. We've copied the policy very much from Tiny Townships policy, and in reviewing others around us. And this just, I think, is really, really needed to try and manage this individual that is challenging us because he threatens some of the recent towers that he's put up are not in compliance, and we need to have a policy in place that gets followed in the future.
Okay, thank you. Brian.
So it's fairly clear that some don't want to have this policy in place, some individuals. Who's got the hammer to enforce this? Is it us that has to push back, or do we go to Industry Canada and say, no?
Yeah, Industry Canada, what our position is that we have a policy, and at the end of the day, we have to provide within a certain period of time. I believe it's, I'm going to stand corrected, 120 to 150 days to be either non-concurrent with his project or concurrent, and let the Industry Canada know. We can't hold up the project beyond those timelines. And so if we're not concurrent with his, in concurrence with his project related to setbacks and the safety issues and all that sort of thing, we would report that, and Industry Canada would come on to him to follow basically the CPC policy.
So if you indicated earlier there, if I might, Mr. Mayor, that some recent towers do not comply. Do they not comply with this policy, or do they not comply with Industry Canada's rules?
Both.
Because if they're not complying with Industry Canada rules, then why are the towers up?
Well, there's not enough oversight, and that's why we need enough local policy. And if he doesn't meet the local policy, we have something to send to Industry Canada.
Well, okay.
I understand.
I don't have a lot of, to be honest, I don't have a lot of faith in Industry Canada, because if they're not enforcing the rules they have now, they're not going to in the future. And all this is going to do, it looks like, is going to dump more work in the lap of our bylaw enforcement officer, who already is overrun with stuff. So
Yeah,
I hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah. No, this wouldn't come into bylaw enforcement. We just shove it on Industry Canada.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Barb.
So through you, Dave. So basically what you're saying is that Industry Canada doesn't have the resources to enforce their own policy. So they need boots on the ground for us to create oversight, which puts us in the negative light with the developers who will not hesitate to give us bad press and make it all about how we're holding it up, when in fact we're only trying to get them to enforce the Industry Canada policy that Industry Canada won't enforce.
Yeah, so let me just back that up a wee bit. Yes and no, but I think you referred to developers. It's only one developer.
Well, I'm sorry, I'm just saying it in generic terms so as not to focus in on any one individual.
So one developer did respond and said he was fine with this policy before we even amended it to fit CPC 100% based on staff's review.
Yeah.
Then the other developer didn't even respond, and they're
Right.
big developers.
I read your report.
Yeah, and the other developer, I mean, the County of Grays had these same challenges and threats related to that served community thing. So anyway, height of towers and setbacks, those are pretty critical things, and health and safety. That's the main things we're focusing on. Plus, referencing in here, right in their policy, is including land use authority consultation. And that means talking to Clint, and that just hasn't been done. So we've got a local policy now that says, hey, you need to do this.
Right.
I think Clint is urgently wanting to speak.
Yep, go ahead, Clint.
Well, you sort of nailed it, Dave. This policy is not going to bylaw enforcement. It's going to land on my lap. But here's what I have to say about are we doing an extra policy that maybe we don't need to do because the province is doing it. And I've said this before to council, nobody has the Township of Southgate's interest in mind better than the Township of Southgate. So the reasons that we do something are local. If we're looking, we don't want something because of a particular reason, it's because Southgate doesn't want it. If you allow the province to dictate what it is can and can't happen, whether they could enforce it or not, it's still the province making the decision and ultimately imposing what they think should happening. At least with this policy, you have a say, and you can go back to the province and say, hey, look, we haven't agreed with this, and here's why, because in our municipality, we have these concerns. And then it gives the province then something to turn back to the developer and say, you know, they're right. You need to follow their policy. And that most of the other developers are totally fine with the policy. They always call me first and ask, do you have a policy? Some individuals don't, though.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, and I just want to say I like Dave's explanation that, you know, it's more about requiring the consultation where most will and some will not, or one will not. And we're not overstepping our reach. We're just trying to get the basics followed, which are outlined by the Industry Canada. So that was my understanding. So I'm supportive, and we'll just deal with the bad press when we get it.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else have any comments? Jim, and then Martin.
Dave, how many towers have gone up, and when did they go up?
There's 2 towers that I know of in relation to the one individual that didn't want to comply or deal with us, and that was in 2020.
And he put these up without any permission?
Correct.
And he got the landowner's permission?
Correct. And I'd even comment that I'm not sure he got the landowner's permission. He said he did in one case, and we talked to the landowner, and they never talked to them. And this tower set within 10 feet of his property line.
Okay.
Martin?
Yeah, that was kind of one of my questions. If it is a private owner and, you know, buyer beware kind of idea, these guys, though, because they do have federal and provincial standards to build, they have to be complying there. This is just about companies, any company coming in and saying, what do we have to do to get a tower up? What is your policy? That's what this is about, right? So do you think it's going to stop any smaller people coming into the township to do work because of all the paperwork? Or because you did mention in your other report about SWIFT being an important part of this for getting money, but then you also said, you know, you said the bigger companies can, as you said, auction off some of their services. So this is just basically for good planning and doing the right thing, basically. And it's not going to stop any, it's not going to stop any smaller investment where a company can come in and say, we'll service the rest of this community of 200 homes.
Yeah.
The whole point is trying to get the cost down, right?
No, for sure. And we're not there to add to cost. We're here just to say, here's a document. We're putting it in very simple terms. It complies with the CPC policy. Just do it and you'll be fine. And the big companies don't even bat an eye. They look at the policy and they go through the steps and away they go.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, if you're concerned about spending $1, then you're going to be concerned about this policy. I mean, the simple things of parking off onto the property, not parking on the roadway, The simple things of making sure the setback from the tower is 3 times the tower height. And in this case, in Hopeville, it is not. So these are things that are concerning and we need to just follow through on.
Yeah. And I believe that was part of the wind towers too. It had to be certain back away from the size of the tower, which is understandable.
Yeah.
How those ones got on the road up around McIntyre, I don't know, but yeah, that's good. That was my questions.
Okay. Any other questions? Oh, Clint, you wanted to say something.
I just wanted to add that this isn't a added layer of red tape or anything for the small developer. It's replacing what is the federal procedure by default. So the CPC policy is the default policy that they have to follow. So now we just have a local policy that they have to follow, which complies with the CPC policy, but it's a little more tailored to Southgate. So it's the same procedure. It's just now we're running the ship as opposed to the province or federal government.
Okay.
Okay. Anything further? Seeing none, is anyone opposed to this motion? That is carried. And next we have the bylaw, moved by Martin, seconded by Michael. Any comments on the bylaw? Seeing none, Lindsay, I'll get you to do the vote.
Thank you, Mayor Woodbury. Recorded vote called for bylaw 2021-123 to adopt the communications tower and antenna policy. Councillor Frew,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Milne,
Yay.
Councillor Rice,
Yes.
Councillor Shipston,
Yep. Yes.
Councillor Dobreen,
In favor?
Councillor Shearson,
Yes.
Mayor Woodbury.
Yes.
By a vote of 7-0, that's carried.
Okay, thank you. Next, moved by Brian, seconded by Jim, and that is Planning Report 2021-070. Clint, did you want to add anything to this?
I think the report speaks for itself. It's for a butcher shop, and we've had a public meeting on it, and there were no concerns, so I'm recommending it be approved.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none. Oh, Dave, go ahead.
We've got lots of time here now for this one, but I just want to share with you, I had somebody come in my driveway and complain about how long it took for this project to get approved and go through the process. And I didn't know anything about it. So I did some research. I talked to Clint, and what come out of it was, no, I know it wasn't you. No, it wasn't you. You didn't drive a Ford pickup. Anyway, when I did the research into it, what happened was this individual basically relied on our planning staff to do his planning and lead the project, where I think where you have people like Israel and Abraham involved, they lead it, and at times it gets moving. And so I just wanted to share that if you hear any of that in the community. And I think we need to push back and say, hey, this is a complex project. If you want to get it done quickly, you should hire a planner. If you don't, then we can go through this process, and it's going to just take longer because, the application wasn't complete as fast as it should have been and all that sort of thing. With that said, because of our official plan review, I want to make some comments about this type of project. And should we, in our new official plan, have special zoning for agriculture supportive industry and the need to support agriculture with, a abattoir, a processing facility that will process canola or other things. I think maybe we should look at that as a consideration of on-farm. Is there things we could do to support it, not charge development charges and that type of thing? So I'm just throwing out that kind of a discussion that we can have when we get the official plan review. But I mean, this is a really good project for local community farmers and so on. And anyway, that's just some comments I wanted to add to this report. Clint may not agree with all that, but I'll leave it for his comments if there are any.
It's okay, he's on mute right now. Are there any comments or questions? No, not seeing any. Is anyone opposed to this motion? That is carried. Next, we have the bylaw to go with that, moved by Jason, seconded by Michael. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, I'll turn that over to you, Lindsay.
Thank you, Mayor Woodbury. Recorded vote called for bylaw 2021-119, zoning bylaw amendment for Maylon Martin. Councillor Dobreen,
In favor.
Councillor Shearson,
Yes.
Councillor Frew,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Milne,
Yay.
Mayor Woodbury,
Yes.
Councillor Rice,
Yes.
Councillor Shipstead.
Yes.
I vote of 7 to 0, that's carried.
Okay. And then we have planning report 2021-071. And that is moved by Barbara, seconded by Martin. And that's to receive the report for information and approve authorizing a site plan agreement. Did you want to add anything to that, Clint?
No.
Oh, good. Any questions or comments? Not seeing anyone. Is anyone opposed to this motion? And that is carried. Next is the bylaw, moved by Jason, seconded by Jim. And it's the site plan agreement bylaw for that. Anything on this, comments or questions? Okay, Lindsay, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Woodbury. Recorded vote for bylaw 2021-122 for the site plan agreement for Maylon Martin. Councillor Rice,
Yes.
Councillor Shipston,
Yes.
Mayor Woodbury,
Yes.
Councillor Shearson,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Milne,
Yay.
Councillor Dobreen,
In favor.
Councillor Frew.
Yes.
By a vote of 7 to 0, that's carried.
Okay, and then we have moved by Barbara, seconded by Michael, the confirming bylaw. Any discussion on this? Anyone opposed? That is carried. And then we have Brian's motion that we adjourn at 1:53. So we definitely made it in less than 45 minutes. Yes.
I know it's semantics, but since the confirming bylaw is a bylaw, do we not normally allow Lindsay to call the vote?
Yep. So if you prefer, we can do that. It's just what we've been doing. It isn't like legislative or anything. It was just what we had decided to do. So yeah, Lindsay, if you want to do the vote, please.
I think consistency is important.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Woodbury. Recorded vote called for the confirming bylaw. Councillor Dobreen,
In favor.
Deputy Mayor Milne,
Yay.
Mayor Woodbury,
Yes.
Councillor Shearson,
Yes.
Councillor Frew,
Yes.
Councillor Shipston,
Yes.
Councillor Rice.
Yes.
By a vote of 7 to 0, that's carried.
Okay. So then we'll Brian's motion will be for 1:55. So we did better than the timing. So thanks everybody for the marathon, and we shall see each other later. Take care.
Well done,
Take
Mr.
care.
Mayor.
Well,
Keep safe.
we're done. Thanks.